Our friend number 6 has a splendid record. He has adapted himself admirably to our procedure, but he has no experience whatsoever of the manipulation of such a community as ours. Beware! Has he got the administrative ability to implement his policies? Can you trust him?
Place your trust in the old regime. The policies are defined, the future certain. The old regime, forever. And the old number 2, forever. Confession by coercion, is that what you want? Vote for him, and you have it. Or stand firm upon this electoral platform and speak a word without fear. The word is freedom. They say 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. Not here. It's 6 for 2, and 2 for nothing, and 6 for free for all, for free for all. Vote. Vote.
This is Bristol. It's Friday, it's 5 o'clock. Welcome to Not the BCfm Politics Show, streaming live from Eastone Studios on the 4th of April 2025 in Bristol. Another Temple of Port in the Empire of Lies. We're live on the talkradio.org.uk stream. Well, no lies here tonight, we hope. No, actually, it's for you to make your own mind up. We don't tell you, hey, you can really trust us, which is what a lot of the newspapers do, and a lot of the television people. If you see, if you see, there's a little thing running across the bottom. Why you can trust us? Well, we don't do things like that. We think you're intelligent to make your own mind up, and so we don't say silly things like you can trust us. Actually, I feel like saying it tonight. Don't trust us. Do not trust us. And we're live on the talkradio.org.uk stream, which is the easiest place to find this stream live. At DJ Plug Radio in Nuneaton, Warwickshire, and also live on the Not the BCfm Politics Show app. There's a brand new update available for the app, which will actually bring in all the links for the stories that we do over the weekend, so you can see all that stuff too. Thanks very much, Nick, for sorting that out, and I'll put a link up to that on our show page this week, as well as on every week's show page, so you can easily download the app from APK Pure. It's also a brand new app up on the Apple App Store as well. So you can get hold of this show nice and easy. It's all done for you, really. Smartphones, don't you just hate them? I'm Tony Gosling. Thank you for turning off the psycho in the corner, gaslighting us with its zero trust agenda, bending our minds with distortions, boring us to tears with distractions, puff pieces on the conspirators, and hatchet jobs on the heroes. Well, that's journalistic jargon, really. The idea of hatchet jobs is something that journos use, and as well as puff pieces. So the idea is make people look much better than they really are, pretend that they're wonderful. As we learn, you learn. Helping us navigate the World Economic Forum's Fourth Reich is Irish Republican Labour activist Martin Summers. We've also got a couple of guests. It is Melissa Topping, who's a disabled activist and just basically a community activist, and her friend Katie Sullivan from Barton Hill. And we'll be looking in the first part at this whole idea of low traffic neighbourhoods, what's been going on here, unlivable cities, as they're phrased in Barton Hill. And in part 2, we will also be taking a good look at we'd be listening to Michael Hudson, who's an economist who's done an absolutely amazing job this week on pulling apart what's going on with the economy in Europe. He seems to think that nobody in the world really feels they need Europe anymore, because Europe is a basket case. They're leaving us all alone. The idea is, let's just let these Europeans do their own thing and make sure that we don't rely on anything that they do or say. Anyway, Michael's a fantastic view, I think, on history, looking at the whole history of this, going right back to the Roman Empire. And so that will be in part 2, as well as, of course, we'll be looking at the tariffs in the second part of part 1. Lovely to have you here, Melissa Topping. Well, can you just tell us a little bit about your activism and what got you interested in because you were one of those people who has been really railing against this introduction of bus gates in Barton Hill.
Yes. Well, sadly, we've been trying to raise the points for the last 2 years of the fact that this is not going to work in the area that it's been put into. You know, at the end of the day, it's a very poor area. It's not a wealthy area. Why would you put 3 bus gates in an area such as that when 55% of the children live in poverty as it is? And these bus gates are also at the bottom of GP surgery access. So this is also cutting off GP surgery access to many, many people, along with my vehicle access, sadly, my disabled vehicle.
Okay, so can I ask you, how did you get here? Because if your vehicle is cut off, I mean, if it's difficult for you to get backwards and forwards, how did you get down here? I mean, I'm trying to play devil's advocate a bit.
I'm lucky enough to have a mobility scooter, which gets me around locally. I don't use my vehicle locally. It's a large vehicle. I use it to leave Bristol and come home again, that's it.
Okay. We're also joined by Katie Sullivan. Katie, can you tell us about your introduction to this? How come you're doing this activism locally in Barton Hill?
Well, I somehow managed to live right in the middle of this scheme without being aware of its coming into existence. I was driving up Pall Marsh near St Patrick's School and came up face to face with the road closure that had been put at the end of Beaufort Road. And that was my introduction to the fact that this scheme was even... So I went to... I live right in the area, and it was going to impacted me that day. And so I went to find out what it was all about. And the more I found out about it, the more I'm frustrated and angry about what's being done to our community against...
Katie, I'm sure the council will tell you. They'll say, actually, this is to stop through traffic. The idea is to cut down the number of vehicles coming down the street to make it safer for the youngsters.
I do get the council's rationale. Unfortunately, the measures that they've put into place absolutely do not achieve any of the stated aims. All they have done is divided what is already quite a deprived community into 4 sections by putting in 3 bus gates, which will fine anyone who goes through them. And the people it impacts most are the residents within that area, just literally trying to access their own homes. Simple things like picking up your poorly mobile parent and taking them to the GP suddenly is involving workarounds of 1 over a mile onto the main roads, which are now already heavily congested. Just simple things have just become very, very unworkable, very, very time consuming, very, very expensive in terms of fuel. And it's broken sort of community ties that many people rely on a daily basis. It's absolutely abhorrent what they're doing. And so I went down to one of the meetings at Cafe Conscious and just introduced myself to Melissa, and it kind of went from there. So
the idea is the council has to really talk to local people if it's going to do something like this. Did they do that?
No, not at all. Not at all. We've really tried and tried.
So you've been trying to talk to them?
Yes. We've gone above and beyond. We've put in official requests to halt for reassessment. We've asked for meetings. We've got an alternative map drawn up to show that traffic calming measures can be put in place without any road blockages. The road blockages aren't needed. Our street currently now has no fire access at all for a fire engine, except via a pole that has a number with a padlock with 5 numbers on it that the fire engine has got to put into that before they can get to a burning house.
Well, it doesn't sound... Why are they doing this? Why are they just... For me, it comes across as insane, irrational, actually bullying. That's the sort of... Those are the words I'd use to describe something like this, particularly if it's putting people like yourself even more at risk.
Yeah, no, this is how we feel. We feel like we are being bullied into submission with it all. We've tried to raise all the serious concerns. They are in breach of the Equalities Act 2010, and they're ignoring all these different things, yet going ahead anyway. You know, throwing it in at 3 a.m.
So that's another whole aspect to this, which is rather sinister, isn't it? Doing it. Can you just take us through what happened that night?
We had a little tip-off the night before that that ETM might be in the area throughout the night. So we were awake.
ETM?
ETM are the council contractors,
okay.
sorry. Yeah.
Okay, so it's not even the council.
No,
else
it's the contractors.
To do their dirty work.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. And then at 3 a.m.
I shouldn't say dirty work. It's wonderful what they're doing. It's so green. It's so helpful.
It's so green. It's so helpful.
Anyway,
yes.
sorry, ETM. Yeah.
So yes, we heard that they had planters on trucks and were going to be coming in the middle of the night. So we were kind of on alert anyway. And at 3 a.m. the phones started going mad with everybody saying, yeah, they're here, we need help. So I scooted out to the middle of Victoria Avenue to see them putting in the blocks there, where Katie appeared as well, and another disabled lady, Suey. And we were all there trying to stop them putting the block in, because that is taking away my vehicle access. And they were just not listening to any of it. There were no health and safety regulations being followed. They didn't care that we were there at all. They came with police, security, 2 drones and a helicopter.
It's absolutely insanity.
And just, it felt like an attack.
I got a call from Melissa, and I hadn't known that they were planning on doing this, but I got a phone call, please come help. And I lived just off Victoria Avenue, and I literally just grabbed my huge coat, ran in my pyjamas and my slippers, turned the corner at the end of my street, and ran into this kind of bit of a dystopian nightmare, because this is a small Victorian terrace street, and what they want to do is put one single lockable post in the centre of it and 2 planters, one each side. So it's a job that requires maybe 3 workmen and a lorry with an crane arm to lift it down. They had like 8 workmen, 2 private security, about 6 regular police officers, 2 liaison police officers. There was a chief inspector's mate. There was a police film crew with a shoulder-held camcorder. There were 2 drones in the sky up above filming us, and I understand there was a helicopter there. I didn't clock the helicopter. And in the middle of all of that was Melissa and Suey, both on their mobility scooters, trying desperately to prevent this from happening. And I didn't sort of hesitate. I sort of ran right into the middle of this situation. And it's only sort of afterwards the kind of trauma of finding myself in this bizarre situation at 3 o'clock in the morning, with the police basically threatening to arrest me if I don't get out of the road.
When the
I cannot explain, and the fury I felt. And then the man from the council turned up, Adam Crowther. Ooh. And I saw him, and it's just like the anger I felt. And I said, what are you doing? What are you doing here at 3 o'clock in the morning? You know the strength of feeling in the area. You know how much we've protested this, how much we don't want this. You know, how dare you come at 3 o'clock in the morning like this to blindside us and force this through without ever coming to talk to us? Because they never did. Our understanding was after the previous protest,
after the 27th of January, they were supposed to come and talk. Meeting with us.
The chief inspector that day had got agreement from them that, you know, there was clearly an issue. They needed to negotiate with the community to proceed, that they shouldn't just try and force this in. And then there was 6 weeks of silence, and then suddenly there they are at 3 o'clock in the morning with no warning. And it's outrageous. We believe in the UK, we live in a democracy, and I could see no sign of democracy that night in action.
No.
Amazing, really. Also, it strikes me that it might be simple to make such a bus gate, or even these planter things with posts in the middle, make them accessible for disabled. I mean, we've had the similar problem with the so-called clean air zone, haven't we?
Yeah.
So can you just explain, because for disabled people, can disabled people easily access in disabled, I suppose with a blue badge, can you just can disabled people access the city centre anymore?
No, not with a blue badge. No, you have to have a disabled tax class vehicle.
The problem with the blue badge is it's not usually associated necessarily with one vehicle. You might be a disabled person who has a blue badge.
Well, that's good.
But if you're relying on a number of people to come and assist you in your everyday life, and each one of those individual people has no right to go through one of these bus gates.
So you might not even have a vehicle, but you've got a blue badge, which means you're disabled, and that means a vehicle can be used to take you, whether it's to the city centre or through one of these bus gates.
But you can't.
It seems like a very, very simple thing to do.
It is, but with these bus gates, what they've decided is you can only use your blue badge to go through them if you live within the scheme, not on the exterior of it. So those that need to get access to GP surgery can't use it. And like Katie says, it's got to be attached to one car.
So you can't rely on more than one person.
That's no good at all. I mean, you know, if you don't have a car, if someone's giving you a lift, this is all very, very. It's like, for me, it's sounding more and more sinister. Actually,
it really is. They've cut off our networks. They've cut off our support. You know, people
the entire neighbourhood, really.
Yeah.
But one of their arguments is that this is a low car ownership area, because you've got the 5 tower blocks. It's very deprived. There isn't even the space for many cars. But they're confusing low car ownership with low car usage, and it's not the same. If you're a family who don't have a car, you actually rely on those friends and neighbours that do have cars to do things like collect up your kids and get them to school on time. You know, people come into the area, drive through the area, do require access to various addresses, maybe, to help each other out. Also, if you don't have a car, you're relying on delivery vehicles, you're relying on taxis, you're relying on just a multiplicity of vehicles that need to be able to access your house. And suddenly, all these people have got one route to your house. It might require a massive workaround to get access to your house without going through one of these bus gates.
Well, you remind me enormously, actually, of the clean air zone, because when they first put that in, it's supposed to be about clean air, and yet everybody, the however many tens of thousands of people that either they get caught by it and they get fined and they think, crikey, I'm not going anywhere near there anymore. Yep. That's Bristol, by the way, folks. You know, it's like it's like a pernicious kind of having your fingers chopped off for coming into town. Yeah. But you then end up with people doing these massive detours, and it seems to me that's almost deliberate. And of course, this is not good for people's time or clean air or money. No, so you do a detour. It's nothing to do with clean air, is it? No. If you have somebody that was going to go across town and then they have to do a 2 or 3 mile detour to get round town, how can that be green? It's not, unless you pay, of course, as well. You know, if you pay the fine, it's okay to dirty the air. It's time to bring Martin Summers in here. Martin, I know you were saying something last week about these green markets, and the idea, it seems, is that it's okay to pollute, but only if you're paying. Now, this goes for things like airlines, who now have to start paying for the carbon they put in the air by buying what they call carbon credits. And these carbon credits are doing things like growing trees. So a farmer that wants to use the land to grow food for us can't, because it's been bought by some big company that's now is it carbon neutral or something? I don't know what they call it. But anyway, these companies do what they call carbon offset. So you can pollute, but you have to go and you have to contribute to one of these firms that is planting trees. Can you just say something about what is going on here? Because this is not normal economics, is it? And it's certainly not normal green stuff either.
Well, Aubrey Meyer, I used to work. Well, I didn't work with him. I met him when I was working at the New Economics Foundation in the 1990s. He put together the whole thing about carbon trading. So he was actually a violinist, so he wasn't an economist. But he put the idea that what we can do is we price up all of the carbon emissions and all the rest that everybody's doing, and then they can trade these emissions in order to try and bring down harmful emissions of one kind or another, carbon effectively. But of course what it actually is an attempt to use a market to create a pseudo-market in pieces of paper or electronic signals that say that you've done this and you can offset it. And of course it's not even clear that you are offsetting anything, you know. And as you were saying earlier, what it leads to is people can pollute as long as they pay into the system. And then therefore they're not in fact preventing people from polluting. And it's a way of getting round having to do a plan. You know, if you're going to make a plan, in World War II, for example, there was a plan to have so much coal produced, yeah? And if you wanted to reduce the amount of coal, then you just had to make a decision, we're going to reduce the amount of coal. Or you want, in those days, it was actually we need to maximise the coal we're digging so that we've got enough coal for whatever we want to do. But of course, this is a pseudo-market solution, yeah? And the whole World Economic Forum, we will save you. What we need is a new mechanism so that people can buy and sell, and that will just solve the problem. And of course, from my point of view, that doesn't solve the problem. And it's just an artificial game. And of course, these things can be speculated in. Yeah, you can then buy and sell them, and people who buy and sell these things make a tidy profit on it. But of course, they're trying to get away from having a proper plan, where you might have a proper plan and say, well, this is what we're going to do. This is the amount of carbon we want to emit, and that's what we're doing. So it's the creation of pseudo markets, which we've seen in the NHS as well. All these NHS trusts are little businesses, in theory. But of course, they're not really businesses, because all the money's, state money.
Well, okay, so what would you do? So this is the alternative. If you wanted to actually look after the environment without creating these artificial markets and trying to make everything net zero, that is to say, if you're emitting carbon, you that's fine, so long as you can pay for it, which obviously is not really going to do much. All it means is that the people who are emitting carbon have to put their prices up in order to pay this tax. As we've just seen, I don't know if you've seen this week, the discussions about shutting the steelworks. The steelworks in Port Talbot and up in Scunthorpe, they've both been having to pay these massive green taxes for carbon offset because they're emitting carbon. Most countries in the world, in fact, hardly any other country in the world, they have to pay these taxes, and that's one of the reasons why all these. It's about 2,000 people at Port Talbot, another 2,000 workers in Scunthorpe are being laid off because we're imposing these taxes where they're not. So, Martin, here's the $64,000 question: is what should we have been doing in order to reduce pollution, do whatever you want to do, save the planet, sort the climate out, without going down that particular market road?
Well, obviously it's a very big topic, because of course, intervention in the economy by governments might not just be about environment, it might be all sorts of other things that you want to achieve, But of course, the philosophy of the marketeers is that we don't want the government doing anything. We want it all sorted out, in
That's right. So if it's a state solution, the Treasury says, right, we're doing this. What are they doing?
Well, I think
or Ed Miliband.
Well, as I say, you need to plan physical quantities, and rather than just messing around with relative prices. But of course, it depends what you're trying to achieve. I mean, the other point, of course, is if you're going to do something like this, which is a very micro intervention in a small area, the obvious thing to do is to talk to people about it rather than just ram it down their throats. I mean, it's just obvious, isn't it? Yep. Why aren't they doing that?
So, Melissa, what do you think is in the minds of the Green Council here? What is in there? Can you get... I mean, it might not be a very pleasant place to be, but...
I really don't know. I really don't know where their minds are at with this at all. I can't think why they want to just go full force ahead, regardless of what anyone is saying.
If the council were here, they'd probably say, well, we just want to make it a bit easier for cyclists. I know there are actually quite a lot of people from... I mean, Sustrans has probably been 30 years or so going as a cycling charity, and they've been behind quite a lot of national things like National Cycle Networks, and quite a lot of them are actually now working at Bristol City Council.
They are, the Transport Committee is made up of Sustrans members and ex-employees. So, we are fighting a losing battle. The WECA Transport Committee meeting the other night with the campaign members was held by Sustrans. So all the questions were filtered out about the road closures. There were no questions about it. We are fighting a losing battle.
Okay, so you just mentioned WECA. Mm-hmm. Can you just explain this? Because we've got a bit of a weird situation here in Bristol. I'm sure other cities may have it too, but we've just got rid of our mayor. Yeah. But we haven't actually, because he's still there. As I say, we first of all we had a city mayor, then we had a city region mayor, and of course the two of them didn't really get on very well, even though they were both Labour mayors. So how does that all work, and which of them, because we've no longer got a city mayor, we've now got a city council and a council leader. We voted to get rid of the city mayor. So what's the involvement of this Metro mayor then?
The West of England Combined Authority mayor, that is. They seem to be a new government for the West of England. I'm not quite sure, to be honest with you. They seem to have a little bit of control over the council as far as funding goes. That's where a lot of the council's funding comes from. So they seem to be a middleman between the council and the government as far as I can make out.
Katie, do you know much about the WECA and what their role is? They're a bigger... I had a very cynical suggestion about what was going on there, in that we had a Labour mayor during a Conservative government, and they decided, oh, well, I'll tell you what, why don't we widen out the area to all the countryside around so we get a Conservative in? And they did. I think then they got a Labour person in after the very popular central government were Conservatives. But... so who are WECA? What's their involvement? Because apparently they've got quite a lot to do with transport. I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, I'm as much at a loss as Melissa.
And me.
Yeah. I don't really understand why or how they've even come into existence, or how long they've been there, or what their powers are. I just know that if you trace the funding for the East Bristol Livable Neighbourhood back, that it goes back to WECA. So it was a reasonable place to go and say, hang on a minute, could you please, are you aware of what's being done in your name with your money? And could you please pause your financing to look at this? Because we're really angry and outraged at the decisions the council have been making. And as I understand it, they are investigating what's happened.
Good.
And also the Chief Crime Commissioner, Claire Moody, was also at the WECA meeting that Melissa attended a couple of weeks back. And again, she said that she wanted to investigate what has happened with the 3am installation, because they didn't use police from the Bristol area, they used police from South Gloucestershire.
Oh.
So somebody had to have signed this off at some level.
We hear it was John Smith that signed the direct order. He's the CEO for Bristol City Council.
Right. Well, it'd be lovely if Joe Banks was here, because he's done a whole investigation into this guy and his background and where he's come from in a previous programme. Maybe next time.
Yeah,
Joe's
he used to
we'll
work for Avon and Somerset Police, it seems.
Right. So anyway, before we get away from just what happened a few weeks ago, let's just have a listen to Melissa and Sue, someone called Sue as well, who was speaking at Bristol City Council, to just give you an idea of the way that they're dealt with at these council meetings. This is a public meeting, so let's have a listen to that now.
If we could start with, I'm going to assume the first one on the list is Melissa. Hello, Melissa. Would you like to start your statement, please? And if we can try and limit it to a minute, that would be much appreciated, Melissa, to give everyone a fair chance.
I'm so disgusted. I have nothing to add to my statement, other than I am now a prisoner in my own home. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. The next I have on the list is number 5, Susan Hughes.
I want to start with saying I am absolutely against the disgusting and discriminatory East Bristol unlivable neighbourhood. This has been implemented without a proper consultation. The council have lied about sending letters out. They have lied about consulting disability groups. The two they claim to discuss it with, the first doesn't even exist, and the second have never been spoken to. Many people without internet or email knew nothing about this. I speak to many now who still don't know what's going on. I received one letter long after the so-called consultation ended. This so-called trial has already been proven to be a failure and caused an immense harm and trauma to thousands of people. Traffic and pollution have massively increased. This is preventing access for disabled residents, causing us to need to make massive detours, causing vast increases in pain, fatigue and stress, to the point we feel we've had our independence stolen. One resident can no longer access their own home in their disability vehicle. This is disgusting and completely unacceptable in every way. The council in ETM have now turned up at 3am in the morning, bullying and intimidating their way through residents, several of which with disabilities.
Susan, if you could start wrapping up now, please.
ETM assaulted myself and physically restrained me through my mobility scooter, preventing me from moving back. And these big burly men, all whilst ignoring the basics of health and safety, suspended a planter above my head. I implore you, do the right thing here and abide by the Equalities Act. The council currently ignored. If you have a shred of integrity, immediately reopen those homes, or you have blood on your hands.
Thank you.
Yeah, so they have breached the Equalities Act 2010 in many ways, one being Section 149 of the Equalities Act, but other parts being they haven't consulted with any disability groups within the area or disabled residents at all. I have asked through Freedom of Information for evidence on the consultations they say they did have, but there aren't any. And the Barton Hill Disabilities Group that was listed as being consulted with doesn't exist.
What's this 149 then?
It is where you take the disabled people with you on decisions. You have to include people. You have to sit down and discuss things, especially road changes, with disabled people. Sorry, I can't remember the actual paragraph off the top of my head.
No, that's fine. So yeah, it's pretty horrifying to hear that the council itself is, by going in there with the police, is breaking the law.
Well, they certainly didn't set up proper official road closure for that night, 3 o'clock. They didn't announce that they were going to be doing this work. There was no TRO in place that's a legal road closure to be able to do work. There's legalities around doing road work at 3 a.m. It has to come under the heading of an emergency situation. It's legal for them to do that work, unless they've got special authorization, which we aren't aware that they had. And then the police themselves were pretty reprehensible in how they were speaking to the protesters that night. We're being told that we would be arrested for obstructing the highway which they had already physically closed. So we're sitting in the road where they want to put down a planter. There's tape across the road, there's a construction lorry in the road, there's police riot vans in the road, there's the councillor's car in the road. There's no traffic going through this area, and we're being threatened with arrest for obstructing the highway.
But the highway's not open.
The highway was not open.
They have closed it.
Well, except they haven't. That's the thing. There was no road order in place. So they were kind of dancing around the edge of legality.
Yeah, well, this is a little bit. What I mean about it being a bit sinister is it's almost like it's a gang has turned up on your street.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, and I said, I sat at the previous road closure and had a conversation with the chief inspector about, are we breaking the law if we're sitting within a legal road closure? And he said, no, you're not breaking the law. And I said, fine, I'm not going to do anything, I'm not going to say anything, not going to argue, but I'm just going to sit here all day, I hope you don't mind, kind of thing.
Or all night.
And they accepted that we have a legal right to do that. We have a right to sit and protest within a road closure. So that's what we're doing. And the police are essentially saying, we don't care, we're going to arrest you in the next couple of minutes unless you move. And there's several Somali ladies from the tower blocks there and the local housing, and they were being said things to them like, you don't want the shame of being arrested, you don't want a criminal record, your children will be ashamed of you, you'll fail to get a DBS check, you might lose your job, you might not be able to get another job, think of the consequences. All this really manipulative, unpleasant kind of.
It's like they've got
trying to manipulate us into giving up and getting
coercion.
out of the road.
They've got their own little nudge unit sitting there writing a script for them to try and get you to do things by intimidating you.
Yeah, definitely. It was only when we pointed out that no, we are quite within our right to be in this road because it's closed that they gave up. They knew they couldn't arrest us.
So, any resolution? Are we any closer to the resolution? Because I can imagine, I mean, if I lived around there, I would be tempted to go and just remove these things.
Well, this is what we keep hoping, to be honest. I mean, obviously, we can't do it. We're disabled.
Well, and also,
but no, we keep hoping that we'll wake up and they'll be gone. Because,
the thing is, we have exhausted, or we feel that we have tried every sort of normal, standard, legal avenue to engage with the council. I mean, even the protest that Melissa started, was not labelled, get rid of the ELBN. It was stop it, pause it, reassess what's happening because this is not working. Can we find a solution that works for the community? It's only very recently that we've got to the point where we're saying, right, we're just going to have to just stop it altogether. Because without the dialogue, how can any issues actually be resolved?
They can't.
How can solutions be found that work for the residents that are so so being put upon.
But what about the residents that support it? The idea that they want less cars around there? Must be some. I'm sure there are.
There are a couple, there are a couple. And we understand, you know, that they want these nice, quiet, leafy streets that they seem to think they're going to get. But this is a city. It's not the area for that. But these streets weren't filled with queuing traffic before, which is what TROs are meant for. You know, these streets, yes, they had passing traffic going through. It goes to an industrial estate off the feeder road. You know, people need to get down to Tool Station and Screwfix to get things. So yes, vehicles used it. Of course they did. It's a transport route. But it was never, ever filled with queuing traffic in any of the streets that they've closed.
There was no traffic problem within the area at any point.
There were speeding issues, which we have tried to get addressed.
The police can stand there and they can nick people, can't they?
Well,
if people are speeding.
Well, yeah, apart from they only come at 3 o'clock in the morning, it seems.
And they're not even the local police.
The frustrating thing about the road closure that's actually blocked Melissa's own vehicle access to her house is it's on Victoria Avenue, which is a road which had zero traffic. And they've put a complete roadblock at the end by Redfield School, Redfield Primary, where they've put 5 planters across the end of the road, completely blocking anybody from accessing Victoria Avenue. But not only have they done that, but halfway along Victoria Avenue, they've put in this 2 planters and a bollard that's got a padlock on it that breaks the road up yet again. And what that has done is taken the only sort of wide road in the area and left only the real narrow Victorian terraces that go between Victoria Avenue and Church Road. Left those tiny little roads as the access for all the vehicles that need to access the houses. So we're talking scaffolding lorries, recycling lorries, fire engines, you know, anything and everything that needs to get to any address in this area now has no wide street that they can use to access. They have to use these narrow, tight Victorian terraces with the corners that they struggle to get round because of the parking. And Victoria Avenue had no traffic. I recorded myself on repeated occasions walking from one end to the other, recording on my phone, walking down the centre of the road, the full length of the road, and if one car came by in the time that I was doing that walk, it was unusual. You know, cyclists would go by perfectly happily, they're using the road. Apparently this is for cyclists. This road was available to cyclists.
It's been used by
There was no traffic. I walked right up past the school. I've sat at the school at the school drop-off time and watched what happens. They had a temporary closure system where they could block the road for the school drop-off time. They put out their own barriers, traffic diverted around. The children all entered safely, perfectly happy. The road's closed outside their school. 9:10, the road clears. It's open for traffic. And all the actual limited amount of traffic which was there at, you know, rush hour goes. By 9:30, there's no traffic. This road did not need any kind of road closure whatsoever.
So what about surrounding streets? Are they now more busy? Some of the routes around this area?
Yes, because you can access...
You're laughing, you both of you.
Well, it's so stupid. You can access the top end of Victoria Avenue by coming in now down with Leonard Road, which comes around the back of the school, and you come up to a T-junction at Victoria Avenue. And if you imagine... You've got the now road closure down to your left. You've got the school on your left, and then just beyond the school, you've got the road closure. So, but you're not allowed to turn left up there. You can only turn right. But you also can't come in the other end. There's a whole mass of housing there, a building of flats with their own parking, which they are not now legally able to drive to, because you can't turn left at that junction. You can't come up Victoria Avenue the other way either, because it's a no entry further down on the Verrier Road end. All these people that live in the flats are breaking the law every time they go home. There's no system in place for that. It's totally illogical.
It hasn't been thought through at all.
No, they've taken away all the wide, safe, clear accesses to all the streets and left us all with tiny, unsafe, unsuitable access routes.
So don't you think both of you should really just do what they're trying to nudge you to do and get a bicycle?
Well, I've got a long-term health condition that means that I mean, historically, I always had a bike. I've lived in the area for 17 years. I've brought my children up in this area. Both my children had bikes. I had a bike. We used the cycle track to Bristol to Bath. We went to their school. We went around the park. We went all over Bristol. You know, historically, I'm a person that on paper would look like somebody who'd be enthusiastically in support of such a scheme. And yet, my outrage at the harm that's being done to the community is off the charts. It's so utterly unfair. You're taking one tiny community in the whole of Bristol and they're now being vilified because people are objecting to the real difficulties that are being placed onto their lives, and they're being vilified as if they just, they don't care about the climate, they're anti-car, they're so selfish. And it's just such a mind, it's blowing my mind that this whole weight has been put onto this one community. It does not deserve it. It doesn't deserve what's happening to it. It doesn't deserve to have this unfair, huge, life-altering system just slammed down on it against its will.
Especially as we did stop 2 power stations in the area as well. So otherwise we would have had all the old dirty diesel buses coming through the area to the
so tell me about that. When was that then?
Station.
It's several years ago.
It's 8 years, about 8 years ago. Yeah.
So they wanted to put power stations in there.
Yeah, in St Philip's.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Next to the nursery school there. And so the community has an established track record of fighting on climate issues and winning. Twice they stopped the council from putting in first an oil powered power station. There was a second one. So, you know, to argue that the people don't care about the climate, or they're not caring about
And it's not caring about the climate when everyone's having to do a 2-mile detour, spending more on fuel and petrol, and sitting in traffic, idle in traffic, causes ridiculous amounts of fumes.
Because they're closing the Palmarsh bus gate, most of my driving routes take me over the river, Netham Lock. They're closing the Marsh Lane bridge over to the feeder road, at least one access. So anybody coming up from the south of Bristol's got to come over the Netham Lock, and then they have to go up through to the junction on Church Road. They've closed off all the left-hand turns. This bus gate will close all the left-hand turns. They've closed the Beaufort Road turn to the right. So people are basically left with waiting in the huge queue for the junction on Church Road, or turning right down Cruise Hole Road. And the amount of traffic which is now going down there, which is utterly unable to cope with. It was already bad, and now it's horrendous down there, because people are trying to avoid this junction right at the centre, which is not fit for purpose.
Well, look, if anyone is listening with a bulldozer, please do get in touch, because it doesn't sound like the City Council here in Bristol have got a clue what they're doing, and actually what they're doing is they're punishing some of the most vulnerable in the city. But everything will be fine, because we are living in a democracy, and we do have some elections coming up. I say that with a firmly tongue-in-cheek, but we don't actually have council elections here in Bristol this next month, but we do have the WECA elections, and so what we've had is the local paper, the Bristol Post, or they call themselves online Bristol Live, going through some of the candidates this week. They've had some hustings. So let's have a listen to, I suppose, first of all, the first obvious person to have a listen to is the Green candidate, because they will be hoping to win, having won the council. And her name is Mary Page. But, I mean, I know Mary very, very well, and over the years I've interviewed her on various things. I didn't know she was Green. She was a Lib Dem, and now apparently she's a Green. So Mary knows how to spin things. She's a public relations person, and so let's have a listen to her as to what she has to say, putting her pitch forward to be the Metro Mayor, that is to say the sort of big mayor for the region. So let's have a listen to Mary Page now, the Green candidate, the ex-Lib Dem, now Green candidate.
So you're running for West of England Metro Mayor. You campaigned to get rid of Bristol as directly elected mayor, running the council. Is it hypocritical?
The reason that I ran a campaign to remove the role of the Bristol mayor is that that role was a blocker to the region. It was stopping stuff getting done. The arena was cancelled, a number of other projects, and it just was not working with the West of England mayor. And the two roles are as different as comparing PIP with pocket money. You know, we can't say that one thing equates to another. The two roles have completely different functions. One was a unilateral, standalone, dictatorial style kind of mayor, not spending time here in the city, and the other one is a hands-on mayor who has to bring people together across all of the three local councils and across all of our communities. So completely different roles, not hypocritical at all.
How is a role dictatorial when it's elected every 4 years exactly the same as this role is?
This role has checks and balances. The role of West of England mayor has a number of factors where it has to interact. That person has to work with people and take people with them. Whereas the Bristol mayor, there was absolutely nothing and no one who could stop that person doing precisely exactly what they want, even if that wasn't what they campaigned for. So, you know, there was no one that mayor was answerable to, apart from like once every 4 years. I don't believe that democracy is something that happens once every 4 years and is done to us. Like many people, I believe that democracy is something that we are an active participant in, and that's what I'm passionate about, and that's what I spent time on the doorsteps in Hartcliffe, in Avonmouth, in our most deprived communities where people are struggling and finding the cost of living is biting right through to the bone. Those are the people that I seek to represent, and those are the people that I want to bring in and understand what the West of England can offer to them in terms of transport, upskilling or reskilling for jobs that they would like to get, and making sure that people have got decent homes to live in, because too many of our homes are full of damp and mould, or you can't even get on the housing ladder at all.
So obviously the Metro Mayor, you were saying, has people to hold them to account, whereas no one was holding the Bristol Mayor to account. The Metro Mayor vetoed the Bristol Mayor's plans to spend more money investigating a Bristol Underground. Isn't that the West of England then being dictatorial over Bristol?
I think what the Metro Mayor was doing in that, well, in fact, I think you'd have to answer, I think you'd have to ask Dan Norris himself about the reasoning and rationale behind his decisions. I'm not here to answer for anybody else apart from myself. There may be a contrast, but actually each of the councils has got a veto, and that's part of that government. That's part of that governance structure, which got the regional authority into special measures. And the government said, "You're not good enough. You're not working together well enough." And in actual fact, they've had that lifted, that sanction lifted, and so that's because they've improved their governance structures.
So that's Mary Page, who's standing as the Green Metro Mayor around here, talking about democracy is not just something that happens once every 4 years when you vote. Democracy is something that's stretched out all the way through those 4 years.
Oh, yeah. It would be nice if it was, wouldn't it? But sadly, this East Bristol Liverpool neighbourhood is going ahead when 760 people objected and 427 people supported. So if this is democracy...
Yeah, that was at the initial consultation. And then at the when they asked us to comment on the road closures, they were given a 5-week window to comment about what we thought about their scheme, which was a bit later on, and 89% of people said no, thanks, we don't want that. And somebody still looked at those figures and thought, that's fine, we're going ahead. They're now in a situation where what they keep saying is, oh, but we had a consultation, it lasted 2 years and it was thorough. And yet, when I was recently interviewed on the BBC, and they had Ed Plowden, his first comment was that, oh yeah, this scheme has gone into place, but it seems like quite a few people had no idea that it was coming, which was a bit of a self-own, I felt, because you can't argue that your consultation was thorough and detailed and, you know, met every obligation that the council owes to the community, if you simultaneously are aware of how many people, A, did not know that it was coming, or B, that of the consultations questionnaires that you put out, you overwhelmingly got people saying no thank you, and then you decide to go ahead anyway.
Well, let me put it to you that they don't care.
No,
they don't care.
They've decided
they want to do it to you, whatever you think. Now, that means, when I say you, I mean people who have to live with it.
Yeah.
So this is the city was previously, before last year's local elections, the city was previously Labour run with a mayor called Marvin Rees, and one of his members of his cabinet is a lady called Helen Godwin, and she's standing to be the Labour councillor. We're going to run through them all, folks, sorry, for the Metro Mayor. So let's see how she gets on.
So what kind of mass transit system, because I saw you mentioned it at the hustings last night, are you envisioning for the city?
Yeah, it's not, for me, it's not about the kind of type of mass transit. My vision is to get the buses sorted first, because that's the thing that every single person out there is telling me they want sorted, and then think about the rail network, which we've already started to do a lot of improvement on. And then the way I see it is, where we've then got gaps in the network, we then look at what the best option is. It might be a tram, it might be light rail, I don't know, I wouldn't take anything off the table, but it's about the transport network overall, rather than getting fixated on one particular mode of travel.
Obviously, there's already a Labour mayor who's been given 100 million by the Conservatives to sort out buses in the area, so why aren't they sorted already?
I think that we've got passenger usage back up to pre-COVID levels, at a higher level than almost every other authority in the country, so a lot of the work that Dan's been doing has been to encourage people back onto the buses. In order for our bus network to thrive, we need more people on there. We aren't Manchester, we aren't London, we're a semi-rural region, so we don't have the same density of population to just bring the buses and say, well, they're always going to be full. They're not. So I want to look at how we spend that money in terms of getting people onto the buses, but more importantly, how we connect up all of our communities. There's too many rural communities that at the moment can't get to where they need to get to. So I want to look into that. There's some feasibility on franchising that I know is happening right now, so I want to see the outcome of that. And obviously working with the bus operators in a collaborative way to see what that enhanced partnership can bring, and then if not, we know we've got franchising.
Obviously, with Dan Norris, former Metro Mayor, and Marvin Rees, the now former Mayor of Bristol, there was quite a bit of sparring between the two, a bit of vetoing each other. Is Labour together enough to do this job?
Yes, it's not just working with Labour, it's working with all the other parties, and I'm absolutely the right person to bring all of those people together and build the relationships across parties, both regionally, but then also, really importantly, with the Labour government in Westminster, because that's where the funding is going to come from.
If you don't win, it's going to be a bit of a blow to the government.
Yes.
Do you reckon that's going to be because of how Keir Starmer's been handling the country?
I'm not thinking about not winning, I'm just thinking about continuing this campaign, being as positive as we've been the whole way through, talking to voters and putting forward their thoughts as we get beyond the election.
Thank you so much.
No worries.
Okay, so that's no worries, Helen. Helen Godwin is a Labour candidate for Metro Mayor.
Yes, Helen actually did come out to us on the day of the 3 a.m. attack. She came out to the CAF where we were all gathered in tears and she came and sat down. She'd had a look round the area. She was completely disgusted with what had been done, not just the way that they'd done it at the time they'd done it, but also the shoddy work they'd left. It's awful. So she stood there that day and did a pledge saying that it needed to be removed as soon as possible. What she can actually do on that front when she is Mecca Mayor, if she is Wecca Mayor, we don't know.
Yeah, so maybe she's got a bulldozer as Wecca Mayor. Sorry, I don't want to hint that anyone should vandalise, or maybe there might be a terrible accident with the bulldozer and some of these bus gates planters or whatever. But anyway, let's have a listen now to a chap called Steve Smith. He seems to be pretty keen to get rid of these schemes. He's the Conservative candidate for the Metro Mayor coming up in the election in May.
You're keen that council will stop punishing drivers?
Yes.
Can you do that and improve buses at the same time?
Yes, I think the two things aren't exclusive. Improving buses gives people a reason to use public transport and get out of their cars if that's what they choose to do. And that's the important thing for me. Councils should not be imposing on people People are sick of politicians telling them how we think they ought to live. We're all grown-ups, we can make our own choices. Our job is to provide those choices for people.
So what are councils getting wrong at the moment?
Well, I'm hearing from people across the west of England all the time that things are being imposed upon them, whether it's low traffic neighbourhoods in Bath, whether it's the East Bristol, Liverpool neighbourhood, bus lanes on the A4 Keynsham bypass, closing Park Street. What people are saying to me is, we didn't ask for this and we don't want this, and that's why I'm speaking out about it.
Would you stop funding for those schemes as Metro Mayor?
Yes, I will, where I can. So Park Street needs to come through the combined authority. I will not support that. If I'm elected, that will not be happening. Same with the A4 Keynsham bypass. That decision will come to me and I will not support it. Where councils already have funding to do schemes, I can't make them do anything they don't want to do, but I will not be funding new things.
So this Metro Mayor election comes after a pretty bruising general election for the Conservatives. Are you still relevant in this area as a party?
Yeah, completely. Even last year in the general election, outside of Bristol, Conservatives were the biggest party. More people voted for us than for anybody else, and that was at our lowest point. So yes, absolutely relevant.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Cheers.
So that's Steve Smith, who's standing for the Conservatives as Metro Mayor. So you'll be voting, maybe, Katie, for him, will you? I'm not really asking you, but I mean, at least somebody is saying that. I mean, it's amazing that he's saying, actually, no, we'll get rid of these, basically.
He was the only person on that table that spoke of drivers and vehicles on roads. The others only spoke of bicycles, buses and walking as transport. So
it's difficult because I think if anything, my faith in democracy in Britain has been so shaken over the last few months that I'm listening to all of them with this very cynical air of just, you're going to say whatever you think is going to get you into position, and then you're going to feel free to do exactly what you want to do.
Well, that certainly seems to be true in central government, doesn't it? I mean, the pledges seem to be gone. We've now got a Labour government in basically doing austerity measures.
Yeah. I don't know what happens to people once they get elected. It's like they stop being human beings and they stop being aware of how actual, regular, ordinary, everyday people in a Victorian terrace in Redfield or Barton Hill live their lives. And it all becomes about, I don't know, power?
Apparently Ed Plowden is human. He came over to me after the Transport WECA meeting the other night to say with prayer hands that he is a human and he does understand that I've got a problem with the scheme and he would like to come out and see if there are any tweaks he can make. This is after...
With the bulldozer?
Well, let's hope so. But this is after over a year of emailing him and not getting a response.
Oh, my God. Maybe we can have a whip round for a bulldozer licence for Ed. Anyway, Lib Dems, Ollie Henman, he's standing for Metro Mayor. Katie, you're holding your head in your hand as if I know it is depressing, but we have to listen to it just to see if there is any shred of truth and integrity in any of these people have got to say. So we've got another two after this. It's the Lib Dem one now. Ollie Henman.
Do you think the Lib Dems stand a chance of winning this?
I think the Lib Dems have a very, very real chance of winning this. If you look at recent polls, we're at the top across the south of England. We have 3 local MPs. We're in a leading role in Bath and North East Somerset. We're also jointly leading in South Gloucestershire. We have a really strong team all across the region. We're the only party that has that visibility across the whole region. I think we're looking very strong at the moment, yeah.
You're currently a councillor for the Lib Dems on Bath and North East Somerset Council. And I appreciate this was mainly before you were elected to council, but there was a huge row, really destructive row, between the council and the combined authority, which resulted in buses across the region being cut. Are the Lib Dems going to be able to work well with partners to ensure something like that doesn't happen again?
I would argue that was down to the personality of the mayor at the time, and unfortunately the current mayor, the outgoing mayor, has had a number of situations where engagement with local authorities was less favourable than it should be. And not just with Bath and North East Somerset. You could say the same in Bristol, where the council leader was of his own party. So I think it's more a question of changing the mayor. And actually a mayor who is collaborative and engaging, which I am, would play a really key role. And as I mentioned before, the Lib Dems have leading roles in all the councils. Even here in Bristol, we have 2 or 3 of the key committee chair roles as well. So I would argue we are the only party that actually can bring everyone together and come up with a joint plan.
Personality is definitely a factor, but it was also about councils stopping their funding for buses and not increasing it in line with inflation. If there's an issue like that when you're mayor, are you going to be able to secure the money from councils to keep these buses alive?
There's a lot of money sitting in the West of England budget, which was never properly allocated in the first place. I think we need to look at the overall budgets for buses. I would absolutely want to see many bus routes restored, many of those routes that have been lost, particularly rural routes, absolutely essential. But again, this is down to the West of England Combined Authority. We need to make sure that we have a proper joined-up plan across the whole region, working closely with all the councils, and there is budget available. We just need to allocate it better.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so that's Ollie Henman, a Liberal Democrat candidate for Metro Mayor. Katie, anything to inspire you?
There's just so much wrong here with the buses. The buses, they want us to get onto buses. They've shut down our neighbourhood. They don't want cars going through it. So they say, right, use the bus, use the bus. So I walk onto Church Road and I try to use my bus as instructed. And my buses are not turning up. They're cancelled, they're late because they're stuck in the horrendous traffic. They are almost to a fault full by the time they reach us in Redfield on the way in the mornings.
So you actually, just to explain, you're actually fairly close to the city centre, aren't you? So especially in the mornings, you will find those buses absolutely rammed by the time
Every single one is full. If you're lucky, 1 or 2 people are getting off and 1 or 2 people can get on. But mostly you're just going to sit at the bus stop and do nothing. We've got parents with children trying to go the opposite way out to John Cabot School and BBA, and those parents are being fined because their children are coming late to school. The children are leaving like half an hour earlier, but at some point it gets ridiculous. How early do you send your child off to school in order for them to get there in time? It's not fair to have the children going every day to the bus stop to catch a bus which doesn't turn up, or which turns up full, which can't take them, and they're getting there late, and then the parents are getting £90 fines because their children are late to school through no fault of their own. I think it's utterly unreasonable. And then you've got the fact that, okay, I could use a bus. I might be lucky enough to get on a bus. The buses go east-west. That's it. They don't go north-south. They don't go north-west, south-east. They don't go in any other direction except for east-west. So God forbid you want to actually go in any other direction to get to work. There's just no other alternative. And then that's before you even talk about the cost of the bus. One way on a bus, £2.40. You know, my sister lived in Europe for many, many, many years. Go to virtually any European city, you've got an integrated network where each journey is something like 50 cents or 50 pence to go right across the city. So how is it they can make these things work affordably and sensibly and on time and with multiple options in Europe, but we somehow in this country can't do that? I mean, we've got this historical knowledge. We've got, what's his name, the railways. You know, we're creating
Dr. Beeching.
Yeah, and Brunel and everything.
Sorry,
you know, we've got this
Brunel built them and Beeching shut them down.
How is it we cannot create a functioning, useful, affordable network of buses for a city? I mean, it's not...
It's because the council don't own the buses.
That's just...
Thank you so much, Katie, for that. Absolutely fantastic. Martin, answer the question, please.
Well, I mean, the privatisation of buses in the 1980s was just...
Well, it was actually 1980. It was one of the very first things that Margaret Thatcher did in 1980.
Yeah, well, I remember at the time I was living in Oxford at the time, and of course loads of people got into the game of providing buses. So at one stage they had buses blocking the roads, trying to block each other out, not picking people up, because they wanted... Because eventually then, first bus becomes the dominant...
They used to race. They actually... Buses used to race.
Yeah, they used to race.
And try and overtake each other.
That's right, so there were various tricks. And then it settled down, and of course buses are a natural monopoly, especially if you're going to go into rural areas where you've got to subsidise it. Yeah. Because otherwise there isn't going to be a linkage. So in other words, it's not something...
It needs planning, doesn't it?
Yes, it needs planning. But I mentioned planning earlier. Yeah. That's exactly something that needs to be planned. It's not a market. It's a pseudo-market. And, of course, First Bus have basically ripped everybody... You know, they're basically printing money. And, of course, they don't keep open lines which are not... You know, they have to be subsidised to keep some things open.
Well, it's the same.
If you're going to subsidise it, you might as well just run it yourself.
It's the same as First Great Western First Group, and they have a massive debt which they're servicing. So every single bus ticket
can be owned by hedge funds in America,
service a debt of a massive corporation over in America somewhere, not to get you from A to B. So anyway, yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Katie, for that. Now let's have a listen to another. We've got only 2 more to go. It's okay. This shows you something about what's going on within the Labour Party in this country, in that there are so many candidates. I think it was Leslie Mansell last time he was stopped from running, that the party apparatchiks in Labour are very, very selective about who they want to run and who they want to block from running. So they've been blocking a lot of people from standing as the Metro Mayor. We heard obviously from one that got the nomination, but here is another chap who's also standing. He's in the Labour Party, he's a Labour councillor, and he's standing against the official Labour councillor, if you can work that one out, because they're so annoyed about the way internal politics within the Labour Party, the way that some of the best candidates have been blocked and there's no proper free vote within the party about who's going to stand. So his name, if I can see that, Ian Scott is his name, and he's an independent Labour candidate for the Metro Mayor.
You're a long-standing Labour councillor.
Yeah.
But you're standing as an independent.
Yeah.
So why is that?
Yeah. Previously, every time there's been a West of England election, I've stood for it, and Labour have blocked me on 2 of those occasions. So this time around, they've blocked other candidates, such as Mansell, who's already been a public candidate. They blocked Jamie Driscoll in the north of England, and to be fair, Andy Burnham called it out. So I thought, this time around, if they do not want me, I'll stand as an independent.
So what makes voting for you different from voting for Helen Godwin, the Labour candidate?
I've got the most experience out of all the candidates. I've been a councillor for 25 years, 15 years on Filton, 10 years on South Gloucestershire. The other candidates can't match that.
So am I right that the nominations you got to be a candidate, did you go out to farmers markets and chat to people in the street and get them to sign your nomination?
Yeah, in Bristol I went to the Farmers Saturday Market in White Ladies Road. For Bath and North East Somerset I went to Kincham High Street, and then the South Gloucester ones I knocked on local doors in Filton.
Brilliant. So what are you hoping to achieve in the role?
I'm hoping to get the fair feminine for the West of England. When the white paper was announced on the 16th of December, they put West Yorkshire, South Yorkshire ahead of the West of England for integrated funding. That is completely unfair for this reason. The West of England is a net contributor to the British economy. We deserve to be in the Premier League. Our residents will believe we should be in the Premier League. They're fed up with party politicians making promises they can't deliver. I haven't made any commitments to any promises because they're not worth the paper they're written on, has been proven, and my approach is that people, like they did with Sue Mount Stevens, are quite sensible about this, will want to vote for a local independent who isn't tied to a national political party.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's Ian Scott there, who's standing as an independent Labour councillor. Marty, do you want to just say something about what's going on within the Labour Party? Why isn't it that Labour members like you haven't got a free vote as to who there's going to be their candidate?
Well, you have, but if you don't, he obviously doesn't. He doesn't feel that he's been given a fair guide.
No, there isn't a free vote. No, the Labour Party apparatchiks decide who is allowed to be a candidate, and then you can vote on who's allowed to be a candidate. Yes. We had Leslie Mansell on this programme a few years ago, who was trying to stand, and she was a Labour candidate, but then she was then subsequently blocked for something that she said about Israel. And this sort of thing is being used to stop people standing.
Yes, it is. I mean, there's obviously, as always in the Labour Party, there's a struggle going on between the two
But isn't this counterproductive? I mean, this guy's going to take votes away from Labour, isn't he?
Well, he is, yes. And that's Helen Goodwin would no doubt say, well, what, you're just going to undermine what I'm trying to do here. But, of course, he's entitled to stand. I imagine he's been expelled from the Labour Party. If you stand against the Labour Party...
No, I don't think he's standing as... I think he's calling himself Independent Labour or something.
Well, he can call himself
I don't think he's been expelled.
If he stands against
he's still a Labour councillor.
Well, I don't know whether that will be allowed. You know, at some point, the apparatchiks, as you call them, regional office, will say, if you're going to stand against our official candidates, then we're not going to have you in the party. Now, that may be... I don't know you'd have to ask him about that. I don't know what the situation is.
Yeah, sorry this is taking quite a while. We do have to crack through them all, just for the sake of balance.
Can I just make a point about this election, which is that previously, elections for this role there was a single transferable vote. You could vote for what person you really wanted, and then you could vote for somebody else.
It's more of a proportional.
That's right. It's more proportional. If you've got that is enough, really. I mean, I prefer that system, and I think we should have a more proportional system.
Well, it's much fairer.
Well, it is, and what it does mean is whoever wins has actually got more than 50% of the vote. What will happen here is, because we've got first past the post and quite a split field, is whoever wins is not going to have 50% of the vote. So then they will have to they won't really have a mandate to do anything. That's the problem.
Well, it sounds like a roulette election to me.
Well, it's
spin the wheel, see who's going to win.
Priti Patel changed it back to first past the post because it thought it would give the Tories a better chance. Okay?
Maybe.
That's what she thought. And, of course, it does give them a better chance. I mean, the West of England rural areas are quite conservative, and they've probably got a chance of winning, but I presume that the Reform have got a candidate. Is that...
Well, Katie's going to give us our verdict on British democracy after we've heard from the final candidate, who is Aaron Banks from the Reform UK.
How much are you standing because you want to do this job and tackle these local issues, as opposed to making a statement for reform?
Well, it is my local area, so I know how badly the councils are run, Bristol Council in particular. And, I mean, the weird thing about this is the mayor role has very little power. In fact, if you actually look at it, the guy's achieved almost nothing. And it's 3 competing councils that really have a veto over the mayor. So there's no mistake, it's not a sort of job where you can actually get a great deal done. But I think my approach to it is to audit the hell out of the local councils, see what they're actually up to, and pressurise them to provide better services for local people. So focus on local services rather than the idiotic stuff they sometimes get up to.
What's an idiotic thing they've got to do recently?
There's many idiotic things. I mean, you look at, for instance, like, the mayor here. They spent £5 million on a trial of how to better get around Bristol. Well, there's only one way to better get around Bristol, and that's have more buses and more services that people can get around. But £5 million spent on a trial that went nowhere and did nothing.
So you wouldn't be interested in a Bristol Underground style mass transport system at all?
I think the residents, the chaos involved in doing that would be absolute. I think a good increase in bus services would be a much better way to do it. If you look at the previous mayor, they spent £40 million making the buses green, sticking a picture of himself in the back of the bus, and then run out of money for subsidised bus, schemes. So I think, focus the money on actual services that people want.
There were some protesters talking about you outside the hustings the other night. There's been a lot of people talking about your tweet describing Bristol as a little Somalia.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I wasn't invited to the event, so they missed out on seeing me. So I was a bit disappointed not to get an invite. The organisers said they had actually sent it to someone in Reform, but it never made its way to me. I guess my issue, as you would imagine, standing for Reform, is that we need to control immigration, otherwise services suffer for everybody.
So does that mean you still see Bristol as a little Somalia?
Well, I think that was just an off-the-cuff comment, but I mean, recent Home Office figures showed that Somalian community are 10 times more likely to commit serious crimes than any other. And I think it's no surprise with that level of, people that we've had issues with drugs and crime and all sorts.
Yeah. Yes, we have, and not all of them are Somalis, Aaron. Anyway, that's Aaron Banks, who's standing for Metro Mayor for Reform Party. Katie, what do you reckon to that? Any inspiration there?
Personally, I think it's quite frightening that the person who is talking the most sense about sort of everyday life for people in Bristol is from the Reform Party, because it opens the door to sort of the wider things that many people feel strongly that they can't get behind. I personally very strongly stand against what Reform stands for, and yet they're talking the most sense on the sort of granular level for how the political system works in Bristol, and how they're actually listening to the people. It just it blows my mind that I can actually, on one level, agree with some of the things he's saying, and then, of course, he starts talking about the Somalian community, and, of course, then immediately I've got an issue with what he's saying, that we've got a huge Somalian community in Barton Hill. They're not the problem here. And so I can't support that kind of that stance that doesn't involve everybody who's already, here, living, working, contributing, is a full part of our local society. But like you said, if the person who's winning is going to be winning with, say, like a 25% margin, and then they feel free to act on behalf of their 25%, which means the other 75% can go hang, then we just lurch from one problem to another with nobody being elected who's actually trying to take on board everybody's viewpoints. Because all the party people who represent all the parties, all living in Bristol, Greens, Lib Dems, Labour, Conservatives, and you can't get elected into the position and then just pretend like all those other people don't count.
No. Well, look, it's almost as if what's going on is every person you can vote for has got some kind of fundamental flaw that means you can't vote for them. So this is, in a way, it's like torturing the voters. What are they up to?
We're politically bankrupt.
What do you make about this little Somalia remark from Aaron Banks, Martin?
Well, it's not even a dog whistle, is it? It's straight up. And the people who will probably vote for him probably don't live in Barton Hill and are not Somalis. They'll be in the rural areas where they don't, in fact, see that many foreigners, but they don't like them because they don't like the attitude. I think the problem we've got now is because the Tories must have a pretty good chance to win this, I would have thought, but the Reform guy will take some of their votes away. So that's likely that will make it more difficult for them, which then, of course, makes the Labour Party more likely to win, because, of course, they did win with Dan Norris. Because, of course, you've got parts of the region which were mining districts, really, and, of course, Dan Norris's dad was a miner from Poulton and all the rest of it.
Not a toolmaker.
No, a miner. But the point is, you've still got, there's parts of the region, not Bristol, which are traditionally Labour voting. So, and it's if it was a football competition, it would be an interesting competition. And, I'm no doubt the bookmakers can give you a chance on who's going to win whatever. But, of course, what we really need, if you had a proportional system, you could vote for what you really wanted, and then you put them all in preference. And, of course, whoever wins at the end of that process has got the majority support. And of course, and one of the things that happens when you do that, as well, is when you're pitching to the voters, you've got to actually think about people who are going to vote for you second or third or whatever. So instead of saying that they're all stupid, the Greens and the Labour Party, for example, don't vote Labour because you need to vote Green, and the Greens were saying Labour saying don't vote Green, you've got to vote. If you've got a proportional setup, people can actually vote for what they want and you can work it through, which is normal practice in most countries in Europe, but not here. And that is actually fundamental to the mistakes and mess that this country's ended up in over the years. It's just not. Margaret Thatcher never had 50% support in the country, never. But she did an awful lot of stuff that she wanted to do. Privatise the buses, for example. So we're now stuck with that all these years later. Stuck with it. even though nobody wanted it and the majority didn't want
Look,
it.
in theory, we're not stuck with it, are we? We could vote for a party that would renationalise and start to bring the prices of the buses down to the cost of providing a bus.
You might also provide free buses in places, in some countries, in Tallinn, in Estonia, and in Seattle, the buses are free.
Well, they wanted to do that in London.
They did. Well, Ken Livingstone was moving in that direction, but
this is in the 1980s.
Yeah, but then there was a legal challenge by Bromley Council to what they wanted to do, and they were forced. Bus services are not supposed to make a profit. They're supposed to provide a service so that people can go from A to B. Yeah, and of course, if the idea that they've got to make a profit is just wrong. But nevertheless, we've had 13 years of Labour government with Blair and Brown, but they didn't do anything about any of these things. Yeah. And of course, that's why we're still stuck with them. We've got a new Labour government now, a new Labour government, and they're not going to do anything about it either. Helen Godwin is not going to renationalise the buses around here. It's not in her power to do it.
No, well, it'd be nice to see if it. This is, I suppose, the question is about functioning. Does democracy function? So, if either of you would like to say something about that, because you're right in the front line there with all these things being done to you. Katie? So I'm putting you on the spot again.
I think we're a bit stumped at that one, really.
I just...
Do you see a way through all this, anyway, is what I'm trying to...
I don't see a way through at the moment because nobody is standing. There's no party, there's no political person standing to represent any kind of alternative. You've got the Conservatives, and then you've got the Conservative Light, which is Labour, and then you've got a whole load of others who don't seem to have a realistic chance to sort of take power, if you like. And all I see in the future is some kind of disastrous slide towards being a mini America, which just fills me with more horror. You've got a country that's taken capitalism to the ultimate, to the point of destroying a country, and people leaning that way in this country. Like you say, these things should not be for profit. The health service, the railways, the buses, all these public things that we have had over the years and took for granted, they should never be for profit.
Well, you bring me right on to our next story, which is millions of Britons brace for across-the-board bill rises in awful April. This is in The Guardian this week. So the 1st of April, we've got all these changes, like council tax going up. We've also got water bills going up, Ofwat saying it's okay to put up these bills, some people paying up to 30% more for their water. And we know as well with electricity and gas, energy prices, those bills are all going up. So poorer areas like, it may be that some parts of the city you're going, oh, this is fine, I don't mind, I've got quite a few shares actually in the water company, and they give me quite a good return and pretty much pay my water bills for me. But Barton Hill's not like that, St Paul's is not like that. So how do families cope with this?
God knows, how do you cope with it? We're all really struggling from the last price rises. They all went down. Labour said they were going to keep it down, and they've gone against that pledge straight away.
Millions of households are bracing themselves for a raft of price increases across a range of bills, from energy to water to car tax and the TV licence that take effect on Tuesday this week, with so many costs rising at once, prompting some to label this month awful April. Well, I think that's an understatement. But anyway, it's not a very nice thing to do to people, is it? The government doesn't seem to be actually acting in our interests at all anymore. They're facing fresh calls to take action to limit the impact of some of the increases. Lib Dems claim ministers needed to get a grip on energy bills. Well, I think it's not just the Lib Dems saying that, Martin, is it?
No, underlying all of this, of course, is the Americans blowing up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which has basically wrecked the European economy. We're facing a depression now. And of course,
it's underpinned. All this is underpinned by higher energy prices.
Yes, and the energy prices are going through the roof, because we used to get fairly cheap gas and oil from the Russians. And the Russians would have carried on supplying it as well. They didn't cut it off. We cut it off. And then, of course, in Germany, they were talking about, well, maybe we could reopen the pipeline. And, of course, Seymour Hersh, the US journalist, had got inside information, and we blew it up. That's a very, 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 serious act of international terrorism, if you think about it. And then, of course, we've got Keir Starrmer now saying we're going to have to cut disability benefits because we need to make more tanks, because we've got to go and fight the Russians who have already won the war. So even if we made these tanks, we'd never get to use them anyway. But it just shows you how, because the actual official political system is a facade for what really goes on. And there's, behind that is the real powers. And of course, your particular problem that you've got in Barton Hill, and you said that Helen Goodwin came to talk to you on the day of the putting.
Well, that means a lot, actually, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think
I don't know. I
think it's quite possible. It may be within her powers to change what you need changed here.
Yeah.
And if she's on side with that one, I shall probably vote for her because I'm a member of the Labour Party anyway. But in any case, because it's a first past the post election, you can't fiddle around. You've got to just vote for one you think is going to win.
You have to use tactical voting, don't you?
Yeah. But I mean, if she's already said that she's not happy with what's happened in Barton Hill, then you can hold her to that. Or hopefully you can hold her to it.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I don't know whether it's the count. Is it? I don't really know whether this decision has been taken at. Is it been taken by the Green local council?
It's a city council.
Yeah, but I mean they presumably get funding from WECA. From WECA.
Yeah.
So in other words, there's leverage there of some kind.
Yeah, definitely. Dan Norris said that there was opportunity for change. So,
well, there you are. I mean, there you are. So, that's a fairly clear.
He did also instruct Tony Dyer to have a meeting with us, but that hasn't happened either.
That's the council leader, Green council leader, Tony Dyer.
Yes.
So, look, it is depressing, but it's nice to see that both of you two have got kind of a smile on your face at the same time, because it's like, we know what you're up to. Don't pretend we don't know. Don't insult us. So there is obviously a bit of a fight back going on against what's happening. And over the last couple of weeks, it was 2 weeks ago actually, that Rachel Reeves announced in her spring statement that they were going to be cutting lots and lots from disabled people's budgets. Now, what are these people up to? They seem, to be honest, they seem evil to me. There's a sort of sense of, well, who's the most vulnerable people? Let's take some money off of them, because actually the big companies, they're quite strong and they're quite tough, and we get money from them anyway. And so maybe we'll just leave them alone. People like Google or whoever who managed to move their wealth around the world quite successfully. And so when you heard that news, what did it make you think, Melissa?
Like we've been kicked in the gut again, basically. It just feels like we're being taken from at every angle. It really does. If you can't hit someone where it hurts, hit the poor. So that's what it feels like.
There's a guy called Ben Clement, who I know from a long, long time ago, and he's a disabled. Actually, I think he's just a sort of social justice activist on Twitter and various other platforms, and I came across this guy called Martin Kavanagh, who was outside the council as all this stuff was going on a couple of weeks ago, and so here he is. There's a couple of minutes of him talking at the Bristol Disability Benefits Cuts protest, because people do get out on the streets here in Bristol and they make a fuss about things when they don't like them.
In 2025, under a so-called Labour government, we really shouldn't be having to have the same arguments that were won 80 years ago. We shouldn't have to be revisiting whether or not people deserve respect and dignity if they can't work, or they're too unwell or unhealthy to work. We shouldn't have to have the same arguments back as we did in the 40s, that actually those who can afford to should be paying the greatest share to support those who can't. The narrative has changed, hasn't it? Over the last 30 years, it's not new, it's not even over the last 15 years, like people say. Because let's face it, the Blair government was a bloody disaster for this country. Thatcher certainly was, Majors was, Every single government over the last 30, 40 years has targeted the working class, has demonised those who claim benefits, and have done so because they wanted to get in bed with big business. They wanted to prop up capitalism instead. And so the narrative has changed. The empathy has gone. The support has gone. And it's been replaced by demonisation. It's been replaced by blame. And those who need support are somehow the problem. Those who need support are somehow the cause of all of our ills in the UK. Well, we all know that that is a downright lie. And every single one of us has a duty and responsibility to call it out as such. And comrades, what I find particularly disturbing is that my background is DWP. Clearly, I've been evil in a previous life. Well, absolutely. We understood, and we knew back in the 1980s when I first started, that you absolutely, on day one, learned that anyone who came through that door, whether they were sick, had a disability, or just couldn't find work, your job was to support them, give them the financial leg up that they needed when they needed it. And you were absolutely told that they shouldn't leave that building until you've done everything you could to help them. And how quickly times changed. But comrades, what is even more sick than that is that the narrative did start to change. In 2020, when the pandemic hit, our members reported, day in, day out, that for the first time in their entire working lives, some who'd been working for the DWP in its various guises for 20 years, were saying that they were not only allowed to support and help people for the first time in their working lives, but the narrative was changing. People who'd never been on benefit before were plunged into that system. People who became ill with COVID and then became disabled as a result of COVID, all of a sudden were plunged into that benefit system.
Yes, they were!
And people were told to help and support, and help and support was there.
Yeah, so that was Martin Kavanagh speaking at the Bristol Disability Benefits Cuts protest last week. Melissa, I mean, obviously disabled people are fairly organised against these. Are there places that people can go if they want to support disabled people, or if they are disabled themselves, to get a bit of support? Because it can, if you're not in touch with people, it can be quite heartbreaking, this.
It really can, yes. And if I'm honest, I don't actually know of many organisations out there that can help anymore, other than the Citizens Advice Bureau and Welfare Rights, but they're quite hard to get hold of. I am actually in the process of starting up an East Bristol Disabilities group to give somewhere for people to come to ask advice. So I do need to start looking into where I find out about these things. But yeah, it's very hard. You don't know where you can go to get the advice. You have to just start looking into it. And if you're not, that way minded or got the technology, it's not there.
Katie, can we have a final word from you as to if people are listening who are sympathetic, they're interested in following what you folk are up to, and they're looking for a little bit of inspiration? Have you got anything for us?
That's quite a tall order.
It is.
I think anyone who's got questions or thoughts about the Livable Neighbourhood Scheme, we have a Facebook group that's very active. It's got a few thousand members, and I think I would ask that the wider community doesn't make snap judgments about why there's been such a strong pushback. Because on the surface of it, you could say, quite easily, why are these people fighting against, protecting the climate and making everybody more healthy and making livables more nice? And it's so much more nuanced. It's so much more complicated. I'd just ask that people don't make snap judgments, but they come and find out more about what's going on. We're at a loss of how to proceed necessarily. We're exhausting every single legal avenue. In the end, you're only left as a citizen with protests if all communication has stopped. And that's where we feel we're at, I think.
And also come to the area and use the businesses, because they are really struggling. They've all reported a drop in profits.
Now, you mentioned something called Cafe Conscious. Now, I think this, for some people, all they need to do is find others in the similar sort of situations. That seems to be especially with a cup of coffee at the same time.
Yeah.
Can you just tell us a bit about that?
Cafe Conscious is the heart of the community, basically. It's in Avonvale Road, and Denise has got a lovely little space there for us all. It welcomes people even at 4 o'clock in the morning sometimes when it's needed.
And so when are the meetings there? Are they weekly or whatever?
Tuesday, our meetings, Tuesday evening, 7 o'clock. Please come along, ask any questions, and if you can be of any help, then that would be amazing.
Okay, well, Katie Sullivan, Melissa Topping, thanks ever so much for joining us today. I'll put links up to the cafe and the Facebook group, social media, of course, without the BBC intervening and editing bits out that they don't want you to hear. I'll put those links up on our show page at thisweek.org.uk. On the wider politics about what's going on with the Labour Party, the left, the opposition to big business and these various impositions, there is this chap called Jeremy Corbyn, he's still alive, and Matt O'Brien, who's in on this show from time to time, went up at the weekend to a meeting called We Demand Change, which Jeremy Corbyn was speaking at, saying, look, actually the left has got to get over this new version of the Labour Party and organise.
Corbyn was there. Galloway wasn't there. We had Andrew Feinstein, Yanis Varoufakis. I thought he was going to be there, but it turned out he just zoomed in. But Jeremy spoke very passionately. Yeah, he was riled up. But there wasn't any clear indication of strategy from him. So I don't know if he's biding his time or if there just is never going to be.
Well, this is a bit of a joke in a way, isn't it? Because you would think that at a place like that the strategic thinking would have been done. And the idea really to bring everybody like yourself to London is to say, right, we've had a good old think about this and we think this might be the way forward. What do you think? So that, to hope to have had a lead at the very least.
I would have liked to. I think the idea is that they're gathering intel and they're kind of figuring it out. But of course, the classic criticism about the left is that we just endlessly trying to figure it out and work it out and fighting between ourselves. We never actually organise. Whereas the right is very good at, okay, we're going to blame these people, and that's it. That's our platform. We've got very simple messages. So I think there's a bit of overthinking, perhaps. But
so look, if you'd have been given the mic for the sort of plenary session at the end, what would it be your message to people who were doing what they said they were trying to do?
Yeah, I would have certainly said personally, I hope that Jeremy Corbyn would come and lead, because I think we need a figure like him that's popular to balance the popularity of someone like Farage. You do kind of need a leader to galvanise around. That's just how it goes in representational politics. But I also would have said, look, we need to fix the system that keeps perpetuating this untenable choice between a left genocide and a red and a blue genocide. The Labour is more Tory than Tory, as far as I can see. I knew they were worse on foreign policy, but it turns out they may just be worse as well on domestic policy, cutting disability benefits. That's not an option. We're not given any choice. So the two-party system must be changed. And the heart of that is two things, really. It's the first-past-the-post system. The only countries in the world that still use that electoral system are the US, the UK, and Canada. And I think we know what those countries generally have in common, especially the US and UK. It's this mono-party fake dualism. Both parties really supporting the transnational global security elite. So we definitely need to shift off. I was, in New Zealand, I remember as a teenager, we had a campaign to get off first past the post, and it was just got to be MMP, and it happened. They ran a referendum and it succeeded. So it's definitely possible. I do notice that Nigel Farage has that on his platform. I think all the independents need to push for that. Whether you're a Farage or Jeremy Corbyn, whoever it is, you've got no shot.
Was Corbyn not pushing for that then? Because you're absolutely right.
Yeah,
it's one of the old. No. It makes the US, Canada, and the UK the sort of dinosaurs of the world, and it might be one of the reasons why we're supporting this genocide.
Yes, correct. I think it totally hinges on that. I've been thinking that is key, as well as capping donations. There's no cap on UK donations. The US, of course, is ever increasing their limits. That's the other key part of it. And then, of course, me, freedom of speech is key for me as well in terms of our ability to affect change. And I actually asked, of course, AI is an imperfect tool, but I do use it for reference at times. And I asked the Grok AI, what would you do to fix UK and US politics, considering it seems to only represent the establishment? And it spat back exactly what I've been saying, which gave me a little, a little confidence, I suppose. That it said exactly that. It said it needs to get off first past the post, it needs to cap donations, and it needs to support freedom of speech. I don't know if it's just telling me.
No, it's amazing that the Grok AI is supporting you, but Jeremy Corbyn isn't.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
Oh, well, never mind. Look, you can only just keep trying. Matt, where do people find and follow you?
Yeah, I'm active on Twitter as well as Instagram, and my handle is Matt O'Brannon. It's Irish, so MATTOBRANAIN. And, the other funny thing that came out just before we go is, of course, there's the whole infighting thing, and the best reaction of the day was someone got up on the microphone and said, look, we don't need another left-wing party. We've got hundreds of them. They're outside giving you newspapers. There's the Socialist Party of Great Britain, the Britain Workers' Party, United Workers. He listed about 10, and then he said they're all small, they're all useless, and they all hate each other. And I just thought it reminded me of that Monty Python Life of Brian skit where they're sitting around talking about all the different groups. They're all splintering, and it's the Judean Popular People's Front of Judea. Oh, and I hate them. So, Reg, that's us. Oh, right, sorry. Yeah, that's the infight. Well, they got a big laugh.
Yeah, yes, but it's a shame, isn't it, that the left is not really able to get beyond this. It seems really, really disappointing. But anyway, well done for giving it a go, man. And we hope to see you soon. Thanks. So that's Matt O'Brannon at this event. We demand change. Change seems to be the buzzword, doesn't it? That's also with the Labour Party. We will bring in change. But he's giving a fairly negative view, really, there, of saying, well, actually, I'm not sure they really have a vision. So is what is happening with the left, Martin?
Well, obviously, we've got the Labour Party in power, and lots of people not very happy with the direction of travel, but it's very difficult to challenge because of the electoral system, as Matt was pointing out there. It's in the short run. It's very difficult for us to challenge these things because we just don't have the tools.
George Galloway wouldn't be interested in turning up to such a thing. I think he thinks that Corbyn is a bit of a waste of time.
Well, what you've got is the left itself has got its own, it's got its own little tribes outside the Labour Party.
The People's Front of Judea, or the Judean.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, in a way, if there was a different electoral system, it wouldn't matter, because everybody could just vote for what they wanted, and then we could, it would all come out in the wash, and you could negotiate coalition deals. But if the system is at the moment is rigged. It's a rigged system. Yeah. So we vote Labour to keep out all of this austerity stuff, and blimey, we get it anyway. Yeah. Even though people obviously voted for Labour Party to get rid of austerity, but we can't. And of course, that's partly to do with the whole economic system is in crisis.
Well, it is. So I suppose now is a good time to start talking about tariffs, because that's been the big news of the week. What's your take on Trump's announcement that he's going to start these various battles with tariffs, and also his assertion that actually what's going on here is these are reciprocal tariffs, that the United States has been absolutely wedded to free trade and not been putting tariffs on goods up until now, and it's time to change.
Well, I mean, obviously the mainstream economics profession and others who, analyse these things, it looks pretty crazy, and it is pretty crazy what he's doing. Because don't forget, all of these World Trade Organisation, when we all voted for Brexit in this country, and the idea is we're going to trade on World Trade Organisation terms. The World Trade Organisation hasn't functioned for several years now because the Americans refused to appoint their person onto the committees which make the decisions, and therefore it can't make any decisions. And therefore, the North American Free Trade Agreement, he's just ripped it all up. Now, if you're going to go around ripping up all these agreements that have been made over many, many years, and of course these agreements were not necessarily in the interests of ordinary people anyway, but if you're going to rip them all up, there won't be any agreements about anything, and therefore there will be no discussions about what we might all do together to solve various problems, because it's all unilateral
action. It's World Trade Organisation or nothing, is it?
It's not World Trade Organisation or nothing. The World Trade Organisation, as I just said, has been very ineffectual in the recent years because the Americans have basically withdrawn support for it. They just want to do what Trump and his team just want to do what they want to do. And of course, you can see what the reaction of the stock markets has been. They're all going down across the world. What's likely to happen as a result of all of this and the uncertainty around it all is there's going to be a crash. Well, and then it'll be quite clear what caused the crash. It's this reckless policy.
On 5 Live this morning, Jeremy Hunt was, the former Chancellor, was talking about the British actually being really into free trade for many, many years, and then deciding, no, this is not a good idea. And when they decided it was not a good idea, that was at the end of the success of the British economy, but they only really did it because other countries were catching up and overtaking them. So this is it seems to be free trade can easily turn into just a race to the bottom, Martin, can't it?
It can, and there's got to be discussions about what free trade actually means.
But it means no tariffs, doesn't it? It means goods being able to pass across your borders without having to pay a levy, a duty, a tax, a tariff, whatever you want to call it.
At the end of World War II, tariffs and barriers to trade were still in place. Yeah, you couldn't take more than £1,000 out of Britain, for example, without permission from the government.
Until the 1970s,
that's
wasn't
until
it?
the 1970s.
That's called exchange control.
So what's happening now is that the Americans and the British have rammed this free trade philosophy down everybody's throats for years and years and years. You must open up your markets. You must privatise your industries. You must lower wages. And then, when it suits them, and now it suits Trump and his allies to do this, we say, forget about all of that, we're going to do this now. So basically it's abuse of power in both cases. So you force free trade on countries that don't want to do it. And then, when they adapt it to like Lesotho, who's got 50% tariffs on it, they don't buy anything from the Americans because they're one of the poorest countries in the world. They sell diamonds to the Americans.
Raw materials of various sorts.
Yeah. But the reason why they've got a big trade surplus is because they're so poor they can't afford smartphones, so they don't buy them.
But often countries like that all their resources are being channeled out of the country, and the people who live there are seeing nothing of it.
That's right, and that's the whole system that the US has imposed across the whole world.
It's not just the US; it's Britain too. Isn't it?
Britain and the Anglo-Zionist
European
Empire.
Countries have been doing this, haven't they?
Yes, but it's
for centuries.
Yes, they have. And of course, the big change now going on is that Russia and China and South Africa and Brazil and other countries are saying, the big players in the developing world are saying, we've had enough of this. Okay, we want a different side.
We've now got these different superpower blocks like the BRICS, etc., the IMF versus the IMF almost. So what's been going on is slowly but surely power has been filtering away from national governments. I mean, look at our national government; they don't hardly own anything. Most of the legislation that they've got is to do with, I don't know, let's give people the right right to kill themselves. This is about as good as they can do with human rights, raiding Quaker places and things like that with the police. But this seems to me, Martin, what you've got here is a kind of internationalist globalisation way of doing things, which has been going on for many, many decades now. The Americans are saying, no, we actually think that policy should be made by national governments in the national interest.
But they're only talking about the American national interest. Yeah. Anybody who puts on tariffs,
you cannot expect Trump to be making laws or tariffs to benefit Brussels or Britain, can you?
No. But of course, what's going to happen now is people, the EU certainly are going to put reciprocal tariffs on US exports.
I think they already have, actually.
And the Chinese have said, right, well, we're not going to buy any more of your soya beans. So, and of course, these are
the soya beans are going up in price. Let's just be clear about that.
Yes, the point is that they are deliberately targeting the farm states which voted for Trump. So you can vote for Trump and you can have tariffs, but you won't be a farmer in future because you won't be selling anything to us. And of course, what Trump is saying is if anybody just put counter tariffs like the Chinese, then he'll put even more tariffs on. Now, if you are basically a currency trader, I would be betting on a big short here. Yeah.
Okay. Let's have a listen to
going down the drain.
Richard Murphy, who's very much of your point of view on all of this. He was on Radio 5 Live this morning talking about all this.
Richard, I can hear you're going to explode if you don't come back in, Richard. We got Adam in a second. We got Ross Clark there. Richard Murphy.
Oh, I won't explode. I just want to make clear what's going on here. First of all, these are tariffs that are not based upon the tariffs of other countries. They have been formulated on the basis of trade deficits between the US and the rest of the world. And Trump is claiming that somehow the US is being penalized. The USA is the richest country per head of population in the world. No one has been penalizing it. This is complete nonsense. So to claim that Trump has a point with these tariffs is utterly false. And all the leading economists in the world that I've read on this issue make that point clear. There is no economic justification for what he's doing. So what is the end game? Well, I'm sorry, but I'm going to challenge the naive assumption in the last caller's claim that there will be an election in 3 years' time where we could get rid of Trump. He has no intention of that happening in that way.
First in the Constitution.
But the US Constitution doesn't matter to him. He invaded Congress on the 6th of January 2021, remember? And he's already said he wants a third term. He is going to take control, and the Republicans are giving him that control at present. We are looking at the creation of an autocracy, the end of democracy in the USA, and he wants to extend that round the world. Wake up and smell the coffee. This is a revolution, a fascist revolution, starting in the States that he wants to extend everywhere.
Wow.
And Trump is, and Starrmer is giving in to him already and crowing that he's got a 10% tariff as if this is good, being patted on the back by this fascist. No, he needs to stand up with Europe, with Mexico, with Canada, with Japan, with Korea, and all those states in the developing world who are going to be crushed, literally crushed by what is happening here.
Okay, Richard.
This is disaster for us all.
So that's Richard Murphy, who's also a big person in favour of the inheritance tax on farmers. He's a colleague and friend of George Monbiot too. So what do you make of what he's saying there about actually this being a fascist takeover really in the States?
He's a tax justice network coordinator, isn't he?
He's a professor in now as well at university. Yeah,
he's an emeritus professor. I think he's retired. Well, I mean, it doesn't take much to see that this is a power grab, and of course the problem with it is that it's not. This is only
Trump is definitely not doing this in order to try to re-establish industries in the United States.
He is.
What he said is that actually Apple are just talking about bringing back a plant into the United States because he doesn't want all this stuff being made abroad cheaply. He wants it to be made in America.
That's what he's saying he wants to do.
Do you think he really believes that?
I don't know what he believes. The thing is, it's not going to happen in the way that he thinks. I mean, in tariffs are a perfectly legitimate part of economic policy. You know, unless you're a complete free marketeer, there's no reason why you shouldn't have some tariffs. But this isn't just some tariffs. This is ripping up all the trade deals that everybody's done over the last 50 to 100 years. And of course, the result of that will be chaos. And of course, chaos will be.
Well, is it going to be chaos? I mean, I saw yesterday there was BBC reporters going around to some industrial estate talking to people who do make stuff for export and sell stuff to the States. I think it was Scottish whiskey, people like that, and some other. For some reason, it was up in Scotland anyway. And most of them were pretty nonplussed by it. Say, well, okay, you know, we'll probably just have to put the price up.
Yes, in the short run, if you're looking at it in very narrow focus.
It was difficult to get them, it seems, to be aerated in any way, but I suppose they're also thinking we don't want to upset our American customers.
Well, exactly. So you got, you know, they're not, you know, they've been gaslighted. You know, the chaos this is causing is because of the uncertainty of it all. Nobody knows whether these tariffs are going to be at the level they're on now, or whether, because of course when the retaliation comes in, he's then going to retaliate to the retaliation. So have you read The Art of the Deal? This is the way Trump operates. I know it's the way he operates.
He wants the wrong foot, the people that he's dealing with,
Yes, I know, exactly. He's treating the whole world economy as if it's some kind of property deal in New York City. And of course the whole world economy is a quite fragile thing because of the derivatives market and all of the interconnected financial services. And of course the derivatives market has been ready to blow up since 2008. I would say that this current passage of play is guaranteed to blow up the derivatives market. That's what will happen. It will blow up.
Isn't it actually an opportunity for people to make more money out of the derivatives market?
Well, of course, if there's a big crash, what they're hoping is
let's just be clear about derivatives here, because the idea is here that you can bet on stocks and shares going up and down, and if you think it's going to go up, in fact, it's a perfect place for insider dealers to put their money, because if they know that a particular market is going to go up or down, they can make a hell of a lot of money out of knowing that beforehand, can't they?
They can, and also the other thing is, if there's a massive depression and everybody's out of work, if you're a billionaire tech bro in the US, you can buy up British industry for peanuts. Yeah? That's what the game is. But of course, there's also another factor involved in this. That level of social disruption is quite likely to lead to world war. We're on the cusp of it anyway. This is virtually guaranteed to trigger A, a derivatives explosion, and B, don't forget they're about to bomb Iran. That is the plan. That's what they're going to do. And when they do that, the oil price is going to go through the roof. Everybody is going to be out of work all over the world. Not just in Britain. It won't just be Rachel Reeves's fault. Everybody. In the United States, everybody.
I hope you've got your electric car ready.
Yes. Well, I mean, maybe I need to go and live on Mars with Ellen.
Okay. Also on that 5 Live programme earlier on, someone phoned in. His guy's called Steve in Oxford to answer the question that Nicky Campbell was putting forward, which is the United States still our friend? Martin, what do you think of that particular question?
They've never been our friends, ever. They've basically been our overlords since 1945. And
before that?
And before that, well, they started telling Britain what to do in the First World War. That's when Britain became the junior partner.
Steve, in Oxford, is America still our friend?
Well, that's a good question. The 2 points that I phoned up about was the Labour Party pre-November election in America went over and campaigned against Donald Trump.
Some of them did, yeah.
Absolutely. So I think Donald Trump is just, if he wants to take some revenge, because the Labour Party attacked him in the first place. So that was one of my points. And the second point I phoned up to make was England, this country that we're in now, the industry in this country has been decimated. Now, Donald Trump's industry in America has also been decimated, and what he is trying to do is to bring that industry back so that companies come in, create jobs, create individuals' wealth, puts money in the pocket of people, and then that money starts circulating around shops, businesses, and through the economy.
Should we do the same?
Absolutely. Absolutely. How often have you heard people slag off, if I'm allowed to say that on a radio, previous governments for decimating our industry.
So we should put tariffs on imports from wherever.
We should if that's the way to get businesses to come back into this country and to create jobs and to put money into the average person's pocket so that they can spend it at the supermarket or the corner shop or wherever to get our money and the economy working again, yes, absolutely. And by the way, we already have tariffs on other countries, so we don't need to create new ones.
So he's just saying there, we've already got tariffs, so we don't need to create new ones, but he does want to create new ones because we're going to copy Trump. Now, the whole point of what Trump is doing is to make industry go to America, not to England, as he referred to the United Kingdom.
I mean, you're being a bit disingenuous there. What Nicky Campbell's saying is, could the same sort of tactic work here in Britain?
It could work if the European Union were united, because that's a big enough market to tell the Americans to go jump in the lake. Britain, and an individual minor country, can't.
Is there no point of Britain manufacturing for its own home market then? I mean, we
haven't got a big home market, Tony. Not as big as the United States. Britain is quite a small country compared to the United States.
It's a very, very wealthy country.
Yes, and what's happening?
There's lots and lots of money spent on cars every year here, let me tell you. I mean, lots.
Yes, and people will want to buy the cars they want to buy.
And washing machines.
Yeah. Now, listen, the idea that Britain could be an autarkic country is absolutely absurd. We've probably
What does that word mean?
Autarkic means complete, you produce everything yourself.
Right, like the Russians are starting to do.
Well, the Russians have got the possibility to do that because it's a very big country and they've got everything they need there inside the borders. We haven't. We are a trading... of all the countries in the world, Britain is probably most exposed to trade, yeah? We trade with other countries.
Well,
that's what we do.
It seems we've deliberately done that because we've shut down many of our basic manufacturing. I mean, stuff like the steel industry is going down.
But that was all put down when Margaret Thatcher took power in 1979. She released exchange controls. She deregulated the City of London. She privatised all of our industries.
Well,
they're all owned by foreigners.
Well,
the Americans already own most of our industries. They own the water industry, which is the one that's screwing us into the floor. Now, what we need to do is the caller there. We need to renationalise that, and to do that, we need to raise taxes on wealthy people in Britain. And that is not just going to happen through tariffs. It means taxes on wealth. That's the way forward. What Trump is hoping is he's going to get loads of money in from the tariffs, and he can use that as a tax cut for his billionaire friends. Now, I don't see that this strategy is going to work. What he's going to do is he's going to blow the whole world economy up, and then go, ooh, what have I done here? That's what's going to happen. It's not going to be an adjustment process, and then the industry will start reappearing in the US. The economy in the US is going down as we speak, as is ours. All industries all over the world, the places which are not going down are A, China, and B, Russia, because they're not in the game. The Chinese have diversified their exports. They will be able to ride this out. We will not. It'll be terminal for British industry, and then the future of our children and all the rest of it.
But at the end of the day, surely the idea here is that individual countries, rather than sending stuff all around the world, they can boost their own own economy by, I mean, as we could here, if we hadn't shut down the steel plant, which is a very difficult thing to reverse. Do you think there's absolutely no hope for British industry now, or what?
Well, no, because we could have cheap oil and gas from the Russians, and we could reindustrialise, but we can't do that because the Americans won't let us. Yeah, we can't do anything because the Americans won't let us. And of course, we've got loads of things we've got to do to help the Israelis out. That's why we've got a base in Akrotiri in Cyprus, which costs loads and loads of taxpayer money. But it's very important to have that base so that we can help the Americans and the Israelis do what they want to do and dominate the world. Now, even if it worked, what Trump is doing would be a massive rip-off of the rest of the planet. What's going to happen is developing countries are basically going to go bust. When they go bust, a big one like Argentina could go bust. That will pull down the banking system. Just one major country going bust is enough to destroy the banking system completely. And they can't just print the money like they did last time, because that game's over. And of course, the Chinese and the Russians have seen this coming a mile off, and they have actually taken all the necessary measures so that they won't be affected in the way that we will.
One thing's for sure, if you want to have industry, you need to have steel, and the British government have been involved over the last few decades in, first of all, privatising steel, and then slowly but surely allowing it to be closed down. Do you think there's a case for government intervention to keep these steel plants open, Port Talbot, Scunthorpe?
There is a case for it, but then on the other hand, it's too little, too late. Even if you intervened, you can't just recreate industries which have disappeared.
Well, no, but there was a reason for it to be there in the first place, and the reason has gone. The reason now it can't make money is because overheads in this country, whether it's energy prices, the prices that you have to pay your workers to come in through the door every day, have gone through the roof. In China, you've got all your basic utilities are very cheap, your housing is very cheap, so it's much easier to make steel in China.
It is, of course it is, and in any case, what would happen naturally is that countries, as they develop, are going to go up the value chain. And what Britain should be doing, probably, is focusing on...
We don't hear anything about this, is what I'm trying to say here, is the fact that it's actually the cost of labour in Britain which has priced us out of the market and sent us up the Swanee.
No, it's not the cost of labour. Wages in Britain are lower than they are in places like Norway. Yeah? We just mismanaged it. And the reason is that we had a policy of cutting wages. Yeah? That's what we've been doing for years. And of course, if you cut wages, that's what happened during the austerity period of George Osborne. Is that in actual fact, your economy starts to go down the drain. What you want is high wage, high productivity economy. And to do that, you need to do the kind of things that the Norwegians have done for years. So they've actually had increases in industrial employment in Norway. They use their oil...
the government that people vote for in Norway actually manages the economy, whereas the lot here, they've outsourced that to the city.
That's right. Because they haven't got a City of London, and we have. The City of London is a parasite on the British economy. It's there to basically facilitate billionaires in the US buying stuff around the world.
Anyway, Emily Sheffield on BBC Question Time last night. It was actually quite a lively one for a change. She was the only non-politician. I think maybe there was one other on the panel. Someone from the TUC, I think, who was equally bland as the politicians were. So Emily Sheffield, here she is. She's the ex-editor of the Evening Standard, a journalist, had this to say about Trump, the tariffs, and the closing down of Port Talbot. The idea, apparently, is that they're going to replace it with some green furnace at some distant time in the future, which can't produce actually new steel. All it can do is recycle old steel.
It's on its way. The new dawn is coming. There was a deal that Kemi, my boss, negotiated.
Sorry, the arc furnaces are not coming this summer. They're coming in about 5 years' time.
The start of the build of them.
And in the meantime, we are going to pour steel in from India and China. And we are about to close our last 2 blast furnaces in Scunthorpe. And we're talking about Trump and tariffs here. And they're all connected. And I'm going to play devil's advocate a bit here. What Trump is trying to do, and I don't agree with the way he's doing it, but believe you me, the tariffs on steel are not what has been wrecking our steel industry for the last 30 years. Trump is trying to boost onshoring. He knows their manufacturing base has been hit really hard, and lots of communities have been hit really hard, just like Port Talbot has. And I'd just like to say at this point, my heart goes out to the 2,500 men and women who lost their jobs, and many of them are having severe mental health problems at the moment on the back of that. And what he wants is better paid jobs. He wants to incentivise domestically produced goods, and on the back of that, drive economic growth.
But Emily,
now,
if I might just very briefly.
No, because you've spoken a lot, actually, and so let's let me speak for a bit. Now, I don't think tariffs, it's a really blunt instrument, but I think there are lots of communities in this country who can agree that since China really came on as an economic power since 2001, many big companies, global companies, have offshored labour, offshored manufacturing, offshored industry, and in the meantime, which has meant that our own industries, our own jobs have got absolutely kicked to hell, steel being one of those. Now, we have not helped in this country because, and I can see the unions nodding here, we've not helped our industries in this country. In the lead up to 2010, we lost 2 million manufacturing jobs in the space of 8 years. Now, I'm not blaming it on Blair.
800,000 jobs.
I'm not blaming that on Blair,
at risk, actually.
but what Trump is trying to do is saying that maybe the offshoring, that globalisation has not worked for everybody. It certainly has not worked for the steel industry, and the 2,500 people have just lost their jobs. The other 2,000 are about to lose their jobs in Scunthorpe. Cheap Chinese steel has been swamping our market. So before we chuck everything at Trump and saying everything he's doing is completely wrong, well, actually, I think the sentiment of a lot of what he is saying, we need a bit of that in this country. Instead, what we're doing at a time of our steel industry has been at its absolute weakest, driven by the EU, which I know lots of people in this audience think the EU is the absolute bee's knees. But do you know what they did? They put huge carbon levies on our steel industry. Scunthorpe, over the next 3 years, would have paid 450 million in carbon levies to the Treasury.
Okay, let me bring Siobhan in.
That is what is killing our
Siobhan, do you...
So that's Emily Sheffield, former editor of the Evening Standard, Martin, making a case there for the tariffs, saying that actually we do need a steel industry, and if we want to keep it, we're going to have them.
Well, we're not going to get them in this country. It's not going to happen. Don't forget, if we put tariffs on, the Chinese then put tariffs on things that we're trying to sell to them. Yeah?
You know what, I'm looking at you now thinking you're a big pro-China person. Actually, it's China that's destroyed our industry.
No, there's not. What's got to happen, Tony, is developing countries like China was very poor 50 years ago. They've got to be allowed to develop. South Africa needs loads.
What, by destroying our industry?
No, it doesn't have to be destroying. Don't forget there's opportunities. As countries grow, it's a massive consumer market.
Well, the Chinese are being very inscrutable, aren't they? Meanwhile, they're actually quietly destroying British industry by their super cheap, subsidised steel, which you approve of.
No, Tony, we sent an aircraft carrier to threaten them in the South China Sea. They don't want us to build aircraft carriers, so they want to get rid of our steel industry. We're coming back to World War stuff, okay? The Americans and the British dominated the 21st.
You're supporting the Chinese in their war effort against Britain?
If we are going to try and fight with China and Russia, and they are going to defend themselves...
Well, maybe they say, well, they're fighting with us industrially and economically.
Well, there you are. That's right, then. So it's all a war, then.
So whose side are you on?
I'm on the Irish side, Tony. Yeah?
So you're not on the Chinese side.
I'm an Irish Republican Labour activist, remember?
You're not on
England's difficulty is Ireland's opportunity.
So you're at the Chinese embassy in Dublin, then?
I'm just pointing out that what the Chinese are putting forward is we could have win-win cooperation, yeah? We're developing a consumer society here in China. Sell us stuff. Yeah, we're putting money in people's pockets in China. Sell them stuff. Yeah, we can negotiate about how we can make it all work. But if you're just going to do unilateral things like Trump is doing, then we're not going to negotiate. We're just going to retaliate. And of course, the problem with all of this is nobody is going to be a winner. Nobody's going to be a winner.
I think you can agree with on Question Time last night, made some points about what they think of the wonderful Labour devolved government over in Wales. I actually really I think when they have a Question Time in Wales, for some reason it seems to be a little bit more fiery, and I like to think it's all those little non-conformist chapels all over the country.
Yes, man there in the blue shirt.
Reen, you were just asked a direct question about what's your policy in response to Trump's tariff, and your policy was to stand together. That's not our policy. And I think people have criticised Trump for being a transactional president. I think what Trump's done, whether you agree or disagree, he's put a vision out for what he wants to achieve for his country. In this country, they've had Liberation Day. I think we're in Groundhog Day. What is our vision? There's a lot of people talking. There's no actual clear vision on what our policies are. I think in Wales in particular, under Labour government, we've become the ultimate nanny state. I think the biggest policy that's been given the most publicity was changing the road limits from 30 miles an hour to 20 miles an hour. No. And 2 weeks ago, the biggest news story was should we be allowed confectionery in the front of shops? You know, that's the state the country's in. With all due respect, none of you on the panel inspire me at all. And I think that's why a lot of people have voted for reform just out of desperation. And we're at the point where we have complete lack of leadership. Where are our leaders coming from, and how can we encourage people to get into politics?
Let me hear a bit more from our audience. Man in the red t-shirt.
Do you want to answer his question, Martin, about the lack of leadership?
Well, we had an opportunity to have Jeremy Corbyn as our Prime Minister, if you remember, and he would have brought in many of the things that you and I might agree with. Yeah,
and probably that fella too.
Yes.
And that fella, I think, might possibly have even voted for Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, indeed, but the point is...
But the Labour Party sabotaged him.
Yes, and don't forget, the Americans got rid of Harold Wilson in the 1970s for the same sort of reason.
No, well, hang on. According to Stephen Dorrell, who we've had a couple of interviews over the last few weeks, actually that was the right wing in the Tory party as well as the army got together, and the royals got together to do that, not the Americans.
The Americans were behind it all as well, Tony.
No, they weren't.
Yes,
no.
It's Dorrell. I don't agree with Dorrell about this.
Okay, fine. See, why were the Americans behind all that? When even though it was actually the right wing in the Tory party and the army and the royal family.
The army were against, because the army wanted to go and
they
fight.
hated Wilson because we'd lost our empire.
Yes, that's right. And what he wanted to do was actually, manage Britain as a medium-level European country. And they didn't want him to do that. They wanted the army were very fed up that they didn't get sent to Vietnam. They wanted to die in Vietnam along with the New Zealanders and the Australians. The New Zealanders and the Australians went to Vietnam and got and had lots of people killed. The Canadians and the British, on the other hand, said, well, we're not really going to get involved in this. And that, of course, was the Americans didn't like that at all. And, of course, the elites here in Britain, Margaret Thatcher, once she stopped being Prime Minister, went to live with Mark Thatcher in Texas, because she spent most of her time there anyway. Yeah, the elite in Britain spend an awful lot of time in the US.
So the leadership is a load of rubbish. It's a stitch-up. Why?
It's a load of rubbish. It's a stitch-up. This is a feudal state run by a traditional ruling class.
But it's nothing to do with the king.
The king is part of all of that.
To take up our little discussion a few weeks ago, last week.
Of course he is. He's what he does is he represents that traditional ruling class, doesn't he? He's the figurehead of it.
Well, he doesn't just represent it. I mean, he's organising various I don't know if you saw, he actually had a meeting at Windsor Castle it's the King, I think this is just as a couple of weeks ago. King meets with UK and French military top brass at Windsor. The King has met with the UK and France's top military leaders at Windsor Castle. Charles is head of the British Armed Forces, held an audience with the Joint Chiefs of Staff from France and Britain on Monday afternoon a couple of weeks ago. He welcomed the 10 guests, including Chief of the Defence Staff Admiral Sir Tony Radakin, the French counterpart General Thierry Burkhard, the royal residence White Drawing Room in Berkshire, where they posed for a group photo. The meeting came as Western military planning to enforce a potential ceasefire in Ukraine intensified in London, which has also dissipated now, with discussions between the British and French military chiefs. Sir Tony, the head of the UK's armed forces, said Europe's two nuclear powers were stepping up to forge a stronger and deeper partnership. Now, this is Charles doing this.
Yes. So
not the Ministry of Defence.
No, he's part of the infrastructure that we're describing. Prince Andrew, there's loads of questions.
Nothing's come out about it.
Well, because Prince Andrew, there's a declassified article this week about Prince Andrew's role as a trade envoy in the Middle East and so on, because of course he went round after he left the Navy selling British weaponry to people like the Saudis and so on. That's what our industrial policy consists of, supplying weaponry to Saudi Arabia so they can kill children in Yemen, and that's what we do.
Talking of Andrew, Virginia Giuffre, or was Virginia Roberts, says she's in hospital after a serious car accident. One of Jeffrey Epstein's most prominent accusers said she's in hospital following a serious accident. Now, a lot of the press has been playing this down, Martin, but it's quite clear something nasty has happened to her. Is that coincidence or not?
I don't know is the simple answer, but we do know that Mossad have been very, very involved. Trump was on the Lolita Express to the island many times, and of course, as we speak, he's bombing, we as well are bombing Yemen in order to prevent them stopping ships.
To help the genocide.
To help the genocide, that's right. And Diego Garcia, which we kicked off, it was a British island, we kicked the locals off it, gave it to the Americans. They've now assembled a strike force in Diego Garcia to go and bomb Iran, and we will no doubt be clapping and cheering that on. Now, when all this comes to a head, and it could come to a head next week, yeah? The stock markets will crash. There's going to be a major war in the Middle East, which will spread immediately, and it could easily end in a nuclear exchange. That's how serious all this is. Now, Trump, if he wanted to do the things he wanted to do, should have approached it in a different kind of a way. This is move fast and break things, yeah? As classic tech bro talk. Now, in actual fact, if you want to get anything done, you have to actually approach things more... Look at the Chinese don't do stupid stuff like this. They just don't do it.
Anyway, she was told by doctors apparently she's got 4 days to live, Virginia, but it looks like now with another diagnosis it's not quite so serious, thank God. But it could be potentially something going on there to silence her. Of course, the real instigator in the Epstein business was a woman called Ghislaine Maxwell. Do you think she could potentially have arranged something like this from behind bars?
No, it wouldn't be her, it'd be Mossad, wouldn't it? Because it's their operation. And of course, have they got the power to do things like that? Do they do stuff like that? Well, yes, they do. They do indeed. Yeah? They kill people with pagers. They get people run over. They do all sorts of stuff. That's what they're like.
And they bury people too, who are paramedics, so that no one can find them.
That's right. Well, they were all individually executed and then buried, yeah.
So anyway, back to the tariffs, because we're having a bit of that after the break. Another person on BBC Question Time, absolutely amazing, brilliant story from this lady, a member of the audience, who told her about all this lovely, what I call toxic positivity from the Labour Party particularly, but all government parties really, talking about how wonderful the NHS is and how important it is. Well, it turns out you can't actually even get a basic MRI scan to save your life.
One of the things I want to point out on devolution here is a lie that we've just heard from the panel tonight. So Chris has said that we do diagnostic measures for anybody who needs them. Can you please tell me why my mum has just passed away from cancer being refused an MRI at the GP level because she has been told categorically that GPs are not allowed to do MRIs? If they had diagnosed her in the 18 months she was back and forth the doctors with IBS symptoms, rather than being told it was IBS at the age of 60, she would still be here. When we went to see the consultant, he said, "Why are you here without an MRI?" He also said nobody over the age of 40 should be diagnosed with the symptoms that she had with IBS. They should be scanned. So you have just said that we are pioneering and England are learning from us. I've just lost my mum because of that pioneering that's supposed to be happening. It's not happening. I'm an endometriosis sufferer. I've been refused MRI, CT scans. I have to wait for over 2 years on a waiting list to actually get my scans. So what you said is factually inaccurate, because my GP and my mum's GP have both categorically said we cannot order these diagnostic tests. You have to wait.
Chris, how do you answer that?
Well, I'm really sorry that you've had that experience, obviously, and my profound condolences to you. And if you want to follow up the conversation after the programme, I'm happy to take your details to see what there is that I can do to help. My understanding is that what happened to you is wrong under the system, not just morally and offensively wrong and a failure of the system, but a failure of what should have actually happened.
Well, that's Labour's Chris Bryant there saying, we can have a discussion about what I can do to help you. Well, Chris, you're trying to shut the stable door after the horse is bolted. You can't do anything to help. Mum's dead and didn't get an MRI scan. So I'm not just blaming Labour for this, although Labour have, of course, been in charge for many, many years in Wales, Martin.
They have, but of course, most of the money that they spend in the health service is ultimately central government money. So the
argument is that Labour have made an absolute mess of things.
Well, I mean,
and in fact, she goes into one of them goes into the massive, longer waiting lists that there are in Wales. So why is that?
Well, I mean, that's something for the Welsh Labour Party leadership to justify, and all the rest of it. The real underlying problem in this country has been the neoliberal philosophy brought in 1979. I know it's boring to keep coming back to this, but we had North Sea oil, just like the Norwegians, and we could have lived like... In Norway, people get all of these things provided by the government. We don't in this country, because we've basically feather-bedded the wealthy classes, the rentier classes, they're non-productive as well. A lot of what they're doing, the financial manipulations, don't produce any wealth at all. It's a redistribution of society's resources to the wealthy, and that's why we haven't got a proper health service. In Norway, they have. Because they've approached it differently.
So anyway, when democracy starts failing like that, so, you know, your parents are dying because the health service is being privatised and the government is managing it so badly, and you can't get a basic scan to even find out that there's anything wrong with you, you just die anyway. The treatment is there, but you can't get the treatment because you can't get a scan. So when that happens, people start to make a fuss, don't they? The right for peaceful protest is also under threat. And last week, actually, we probably should have covered it on last week's show, but I didn't even know about it. Maybe it's because the Quakers are quite quiet about the things that they do. But last Thursday, the police broke into this Quaker centre in London, Martin, the Westminster Friends Meeting House. The police smashed in and arrested people who were having a meeting about climate change and Palestine. I mean, this is pretty extraordinary.
I think it was the Palestine aspect of it that they were most concerned about. So, as you know, the people who speak out about Palestine are now being accused of terrorism for supporting Hamas. Yeah? So anybody who criticises what's going on is potentially a Hamas supporter. Now, in actual fact,
can't the police put these meetings under some sort of surveillance? I mean, do they need to really go in and arrest people?
Well, it may be that everybody in the meeting is already a police agent. Who knows?
There might be none of them are. And also, you know what? I think a lot of these youngsters nowadays, and it's a thing called youth demand. They are sensible. They do what Edward Snowden advised them to do, and they put their smartphones in the fridge before they go into the meeting.
Yes, okay, so what is significant about this is the direct repression of freedom of speech surrounding the genocide in Gaza and Palestine. Yeah? Now, I don't think they've not taken anybody to court, like the Filton 18, for example, are not going to go to court after they smashed up Elbit systems.
Our state is most definitely supporting this genocide in any way it can get away with.
At the moment, our base in Akrotiri is providing fuel to the Americans so that they can bomb in Yemen. And of course, we saw with the signal leak that they were going after one guy that they wanted to get, but they killed everybody in the building. Yeah. And J.D. Vance said, excellent. Yeah, that is a war crime, and Britain is involved. Britain has been involved in war crimes in Yemen for many decades now.
Well,
and we've been supporting the Saudi regime to kill all the people. Before we get on to
that, I'd also like to add that, and maybe we'll have an interview about it next week, but please go and have a look at Dr. Chris Busby's various social media platforms, including his Facebook pages, where he's been sharing evidence, Martin, that there has actually been enriched uranium discovered at the site of the Nasrallah killing, assassination bombing by the Israelis. I mean, this implies that they're actually using not depleted uranium in weapons, but enriched uranium.
Yes. And of course,
this is what they keep telling the Iranians that they mustn't have.
Yes, it may well be if there is a bomb attack. As Trump said, they've got a deal, otherwise there's going to be bombing. They may use low yield nuclear weapons. Yeah. To try and get the bunkers that the Iranians have got.
In fact, they weren't talking about that at all, were they? There was one of them. Was it one of the ministers anyway in the right-wing Israeli far-right bloc in the Israeli government was talking about, we can just nuke Gaza.
Well, yes, and that was pretty stupid if you think about it, because if you nuked Gaza, then probably it would be unusable for
it depends what sort of nuclear weapons you use. You might use one that doesn't produce too much fallout, and you can then buy up the real estate.
Yeah, well, Dr. Chris Busby...
buy it, just grab it.
Dr. Chris Busby was also, because he was in Gaza, was he not, some years ago, and they discovered that there was, in fact, evidence that they were using neutron bombs.
Possibly neutron bombs, yeah. So they may be playing with all sorts of stuff.
Yes,
so anyway, I'll put a link up to that on our show page at thisweek.org.uk. Chris's very interesting post where they had to actually smuggle these samples out from the Nasrallah killing in Beirut in a bag of coffee, because it's absolutely impossible. And as you're saying, the official labs, you can send a sample off to an official lab, as they did to one in Paris, and they just get a stupid answer back from the lab saying, actually, we can't really tell you what was in your sample, or we can tell you, but only a part of it. And so he's actually doing them at his laboratory at home here in Devon, which the police a few years raided. So it's actually only Chris is the only person in the world that seems to be able to do this sort of high-tech research into what weapons the Israelis really are using. But anyway, let's have a listen now, as I promised. Did I promise? I'm not really sure. About the Quakers raid, where we're going to hear a little clip from Paul Parker, who is the clerk to UK, or one of the clerks, and I think he is the clerk of UK Quakers, talking about the raid and what actually happened on the raid in Westminster Friends Meeting House with the police last week.
This was at Westminster Quaker Meeting House, which is in the West End of London, and a group of around 20 police, some of them armed with tasers, forced entry to the building, searched the building from top to bottom and arrested the 6 young women, as you've said. And this is obviously extremely disruptive. It's a calm, reflective space. It's used for Quaker meetings for worship, which are held in stillness. It's used by a wide range of community groups. And so this was a real intrusion into a space that's very precious to Quakers.
This wasn't a religious meeting, though.
No, that's right. The building's used by a wide range of community groups that are committed to peace, to equality, to integrity. We believe very strongly that it's important that people can meet and can share their concerns and can, where they feel they need to, that they can act on them.
And this hasn't happened before in a Quaker meeting house, that the police have essentially broken down a door and come and arrested people?
Certainly not in modern times. Back in the 17th century, when being a Quaker was illegal, this sort of thing used to happen a lot. But in modern times, it's the only time we can think of where anything like this has happened. It's really a very extreme example of policing and completely unnecessary.
The Met Police have said that these women were arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to cause a public nuisance. Amid fears that there was going to be a sit-down protest in the capital, Youth Demand, their group, had stated an intention to shut down London over the coming month. Do you think that is reasonable grounds for the police to intervene in this situation?
Well, it doesn't sound like it to me, because of the situation that we saw was a small group of people attending what was billed as a welcome meeting. And as far as we can see, that was an entirely peaceful event, a small group of people sharing their concerns. This is part of a much wider pattern of really quite repressive policing and a suppression of people's right to gather, to share concerns, to express dissent when they feel they have no other option. And I think we have to be really careful not to allow the state to intervene between people and their consciences. These are clearly people who want to bring about a positive change in the world, and why shouldn't they be able to do that? I don't think any of us want to live in a country where police break into a place of worship and take people away who are sharing concerns about really legitimate problems in the world that need to be discussed.
That's Paul Parker. He's the clerk of UK Quakers. Bless him. Nice to see the Quakers getting a little bit of publicity and actually using it. But the point here is, Martin, this is a meeting completely legal, planning non-violent action, and but on important issues of public concern, particularly on Palestine. Youth Demand, they say, stop the killing, shut it down. On their website, they say in April, Youth Demand will shut London down. Well, it's not. I'm not sure they'll entirely do that with roadblocks day after day after day. Join us in our biggest civil disobedience campaign yet to force action from the criminal British government. It's a big banner with a Palestinian flag, and I think that's an Irish flag, and they say Youth Demand an end to genocide.
Well, I think this, for everybody watching what's going on in Palestine, this really is the moment, because they are trying to starve these people to death. They've cut off all food, which is why, and water and electricity, which is why the Yemeni leadership have decided to go back to blockading Israel. But far from us, what we should be doing, what the rest of the world should be doing, we should be basically closing Israel down by refusing to trade with them. That's the obvious thing to do. And prosecuting their war criminals if they leave the country. But instead of doing that, we are lined up with the Americans and the Israelis against the poorest country in the Middle East. And of course, South Yemen used to be a British colony. We were forced out there by the National Liberation Front back in the day. But of course, most people in Britain have probably forgotten that we used to run Yemen, but the people in Yemen haven't forgotten. Britain and the US
Actually, Britain withdrew from Yemen in a fairly peaceful fashion, Martin.
No,
yes,
no,
they did. There were something like 10 casualties on either side. The Brits decided, right, we've had enough, and they flew out, basically.
No, in 1967, the British did decide to go, but there'd been
it's nothing like the Saudi attack.
Well, all right, listen, Tony, there was an armed struggle against us, as there was in Cyprus, as there was in Kenya. Okay, Britain.
We did the right thing, really, which was, as a colonial power, we decided, right, we're not really up for this, and we left. We didn't make a big fight of it at all.
No, listen, Tony, we went and took the place in the first place in the 1820s. The locals didn't want us there. We took it. Now, the British Empire collapsed at the end of World War II and going into the 60s and 70s. But Diego Garcia is still now part of Mauritius, but it was part of Britain, and we pushed those people out, and we put the Americans in, and the Americans are going to use our island to bomb Iran. And of course, we overthrew the democratic government of Iran in 1954 with the Americans, as all Iranians know. Britain is an insular country in some ways and very kind of narcissistic. But in actual fact, we've had our finger in pies all over the world for hundreds of years, in Sri Lanka.
Well, in many of these countries, we did the right thing. We got out of the way. But we then started swooping in by trying to control them. Yeah. Anyway, we're going to have a break now. We'll be talking a bit more about Gaza in a minute.
The first lesson is written in the 13th chapter of the prophecy of Jeremiah, beginning to read at verse 20, in which the prophet warns the people of the consequences of their separation from God. Lift up your eyes and see those who come from the north. Where is the flock that was given you, your beautiful flock? What will you say when they set as head over you those whom you have trained to be your allies? Will not pangs take hold of you, like those of a woman in labor? And if you say in your heart, why have these things come upon me? It is for the greatness of your iniquity that your skirts are lifted up and you are violated. Can Ethiopians change their skin, or leopards their spots? Then also can you do good, who are accustomed to do evil. I will scatter you like chaff driven by the wind from the desert. This is your lot, the portion I have measured out to you, says the Lord, because you have forgotten me and trusted in lies. I myself will lift up your skirts over your face, and your shame will be seen. I have seen your abominations, your adulteries and neighings, your shameless prostitutions on the hills of the countryside. Woe to you, O Jerusalem! How long will it be before you are made clean? Here ends the first lesson.
Say goodbye, my own true lover, as we sing a lover's song. How it breaks my heart to leave you. Now the carnival is gone.
High above, the dawn is waking, and my tears are falling rain. For the carnival is over, we may never meet again.
Like a drum, my heart was beating, and your kiss was sweet as wine.
But the joys of love are fleeting, for Pierrot and Columbine. Now the harbor light is calling. This will be our last goodbye. Though the carnival is over, I will love you till I die.
Like a drum, my heart was beating, and your kiss was sweet as wine.
But the joys of love are fleeting, things that we should have done before. The way things are going, the end is about to fall. We took the wrong step years ago. We took the wrong step years ago. We took the wrong step years ago. Look around and see the warning cross at hand. Already weeds are writing their scriptures in the sand. We took the wrong step years ago. We took the wrong step years ago. We took the wrong step years ago. The morning sun is rising, casting rays across the land. Already nature's calling, take heed of the warning. Now we took the wrong step years ago. We took the wrong step years ago. We took the wrong step years ago. Think about the things that we should have done before. The way the things are going, the end is about to fall. We took the wrong step years ago. We took the wrong step years ago. We took the wrong step years ago. We took the wrong step years ago.
So the choir of Guildford Cathedral, the day thou gavest, Lord, is ended. Fantastic reading from the Old Testament. I do wonder actually whether the Church of England is picking these very interesting bits of the Old Testament specifically aimed at what's going on in Gaza, because they're all talking about do not stray from God's word, otherwise terrible things will befall the children of Israel, blah blah. And in fact, there's several of the major prophets that talk about all this, and they've been using them in cathedrals all around the country. And I'm quite certain that has played a part. The present genocide in the particular verses that are being chosen to be read out, particularly in the first readings. Then we had the Seekers from late 1960s and a song from 1971 from Isos, Hawkwind, and We Took the Wrong Step years ago. So welcome back to Not the BCfm Politics Show with Irish Republican Labour activist Martin Summers and me, Tony Gosling. Martin, the main thing of the week has got to really be this horrific story with the paramedics. And we mentioned it briefly in part one, but I mean, what's happened here is that there's been most disgusting and horrific war crime with these hospital workers all murdered, destroyed, shot, assassinated by the Israeli forces, and then they made a rather crude attempt to bury them and cover them over with sand and the vehicles to hide it. But obviously that was all revealed, and actually I think it was just yesterday finally these people were buried.
Well, yes, and as we were saying earlier, what the real potential for mass murder is going to come in the next few weeks, because now the Israelis are starving what's left of the Palestinians, and of course if they don't get food and water in, they're going to die, which is exactly why Nasrallah have decided to go back to trying to blockade Israel from their side. And of course they are then coming under attack by us and the Americans. And of course the obvious thing for Nasrallah to do is, for example, to fire a missile at Akrotiri and try and kill some RAF personnel. And that's, I'm afraid, they will be within their rights to do that, because we're the ones attacking their country.
The Gaza ceasefire meant that aid agencies could increase their work. Its breakdown and a newly expanded Israeli offensive has meant that they themselves have come under increasing attack, according to analysis from Sky's Data and Forensics Unit. The aftermath of one incident. This is the mangled remains of an ambulance, part of a convoy of Palestinian Red Crescent and UN vehicles. 15 people died here on the 23rd of March. Satellite imagery shows that military vehicles had been in the area between the 18th and 26th of March. Tyre tracks and groundwork slightly caused by vehicles are visible where the alleged incident took place. When other aid workers eventually reached the site days later, they were able to dig out the ambulances, along with the bodies. The Israel Defense Forces, IDF, said it had not randomly attacked an ambulance. A spokesperson said troops opened fire on suspected vehicles and killed Hamas operatives, although he did not provide evidence. One weapons expert told us that the vehicles seen in the UN footage did not appear to show signs of blast or shooting damage, and had certainly been crushed.
One of the things that we haven't been able to do to the same extent as in the past is actually work with the Israeli authorities to do what we call deconfliction, which is to try to make sure that humanitarian convoys are clearly notified and avoided. Now, that wasn't always happening in the past, but it certainly isn't happening now.
This is where the convoy was hit. It happened before this evacuation zone was announced by the IDF. There are other incidents too. This was a strike against a building belonging to the International Red Cross, again outside the evacuation zone for that time. There were no injuries, and the IDF has said it incorrectly identified the building. And there are other attacks verified by Sky News. One on a UN compound, killing one and injuring others. A strike that killed a Médecins Sans Frontières worker, and another strike that killed a volunteer for World Central Kitchen. The IDF did not respond to our questions on those incidents. Take those, add in others we have verified, and the death toll for aid workers has been rapidly mounting. Our analysis of aid workers' security data shows that 32 aid workers have been killed or injured in the past 2 weeks, the highest figure for more than a year and since the early days of the war in Gaza. As Israel's campaign in the Strip expands, aid is even more vital and even more perilous. Tom Cheshire, Sky News.
So this is an absolutely appalling incident, really, and Israel has executed unarmed Red Crescent paramedics with the blessing of the West.
They have, and of course, I think it's beyond
the support of British taxpayers' money.
That's right. That's right. We are supporting them in doing what they're doing, and we are therefore implicated, or our government certainly is.
This sort of thing is not totally unprecedented, I imagine. There's actually been quite a lot of paramedics, etc., killed by the Israelis. So what's the difference here? I mean, this is actually 15 were killed. There were some people that survived the incident, even though they weren't in those specific vehicles. One survivor, the BBC reporters, challenged Israel's account of this attack. He said he's the only survivor who saw what happened to his colleagues. Muntha Abed says, scrolling through pictures of his fellow paramedics on his phone, he survived the Israeli attack that killed 15 emergency workers by diving to the floor in the back of the ambulance as his two colleagues in the front were shot in the early hours of the 23rd of March. We left the headquarters roughly at dawn, he told one of the BBC's freelance journalists working in Gaza, explaining how the response team from the Palestinian Red Crescent and the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees gathered on the edge of the southern city of Rafah after receiving reports of gunfire and wounded people. Roughly 4:30, all civil defence vehicles were in place. 4:40, the first two vehicles went out. 4:50, the last vehicle arrived. Around 5 a.m, the agency was shot at directly in the street. He said that its forces opened fire, the Israeli said, because the vehicles were moving suspiciously towards soldiers without prior coordination and with their lights off. It also claimed that 9 Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad operatives were killed in the incident. This guy is basically saying, no, this is complete nonsense, that there was, the IDF say that they did not randomly attack an ambulance, as we heard on that report. External and internal lights are on. Everything tells you it's an ambulance vehicle that belongs to the Palestinian Red Crescent. All lights were on until the vehicle came under direct fire. He adds he was pulled from the wreckage by Israeli soldiers, arrested and blindfolded. He claimed he was interrogated over 15 hours before being released.
Yeah, I mean, what they've done in this particular case is they rounded everybody up. They put I understand that they tied their hands behind their back, and then they took them away, interrogated them, and then executed them with their hands tied. So it wasn't just like a random bombing, or they knew exactly what they were doing. The Israelis are determined to liquidate the Palestinian population. That is what they're trying to do. And, of course, Trump is supporting them, and we're supporting Trump. Now, of course, they're going to fight back insofar as they're able to do, and so are the Yemenis. And, of course, if Iran is drawn into this, that might change the equation. The whole thing, because the Iranians could actually be bombing these Israelis that have been carrying out these assassinations.
Isn't that what they want?
Well,
they're trying to provoke a response, aren't they? They're trying to provoke a war.
Yes, they are.
And you think that war would be a good idea, even though it's what the Israelis are trying to do?
No, if the Israelis attack all the Americans, and the British will no doubt be implicated as well, if we directly attack Iran, the Iranians will defend themselves, and they will defend themselves by killing Israeli, American and British force personnel. And they'll be absolutely within their rights to do so, because they're defending their country against us.
It looks to me as if the far-right bloc now in charge of Israel, which is supported, it seems, by these swivel-eyed Christian Zionists, mostly in the United States and also apparently here. It doesn't seem to matter what you do so long as you support Israel. In fact, I think RFK Jr. even admitted that he would never have stood a chance of getting into office in the United States if he hadn't supported Israel, Martin. This is the power of the Israel lobby across the Western world, and particularly in Britain and America.
It is. And of course, they are, the current trajectory of the leadership of the West is for, economic destruction and world war. That's what they're doing. And of course, when we get to the world war, from a Palestinian point of view, they do want the Iranians to join.
This isn't economic so much here, is it? Just killing a whole bunch of doctors, nurses, people who are trying to save lives. If you start to do that, also the journalists, of course, it's well worth. I'll put this up on our show page.
It is ultimately economic.
New research this week has shown Israel's slaughter, according to Jonathan Cook, one of our neighbours here in Bristol, Israel's slaughter in Gaza has killed more journalists than the US Civil War, World War I, and World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Yugoslav wars, and the Afghan War and the Ukraine War combined. So in the chart, we have in World Wars I and II, there were roughly 75 journalists killed. In the Gaza War, which has only been going for a year and a half or so, even though, of course, those were spread over many, many years, there's already around about 225 journalists been killed.
And they're being deliberately targeted. I mean, many of the journalists killed in other wars were killed because it's a dangerous profession to go, reporting on wars. The Israelis have been deliberately targeting journalists, aid workers, and anybody who can actually help the Palestinians in any way, because they want to kill them all. That's their policy.
So it seems to me that the idea of the Israelis and the Israel lobby is that if we can leverage and control the press, then we can get away with this genocide. We can kill all the Palestinians, and hopefully no one will even notice.
Well, they are noticing, but nobody's doing anything to stop them, apart from potentially the Iranians. Now, what may happen if they do attack Iran, and Trump is definitely threatening to do that, is that the Iranians will at that point take the gloves off, and they will rain missiles down on Israel. Israel's quite a small place, and Iran's quite a big place. And therefore, Israel, the gated community of Israel will suddenly become a very, very unpleasant place to live, especially if you've got a military uniform on, because the Iranians are going to be looking to kill as many Israeli soldiers as possible. The Israeli soldiers that have been killing these humanitarian workers. But maybe it's time for their children to cry, eh?
The United States is planning something big for Iran as the Pentagon deploys additional aviation units to the Middle East. Washington is seemingly prepared to attack Iran as US military activities in the Persian Gulf grow. It appears the US, because primarily military transport aircraft are moving between Europe and the Persian Gulf over the past week, Martin.
Yep.
This is actually Pravda, which is not blocked, amazing. I'm sure it will be soon. You can just read that on the ordinary internet, even though there are obviously denial of service attacks on it. Their article is saying USA plans something big for Iran.
Well, I mean, Trump is basically saying if they don't sign, they've got 2 weeks, I think it is, or 2 months to sign up to, to get, they've not just got to give up nuclear weapons, they've got to give up their whole ballistic missile program, because it's threatening the Israelis, see? So they've got to give all of that up, surrender, basically, otherwise they're going to be bombed. Now, of course, I don't know what advice, Larry Johnson, the ex-CIA guy, who I was reading his stuff yesterday, they seem to think that the US is sufficiently technologically advanced that they can bomb targets in Iran, and it will cause all sorts of damage, and the Iranian regime will just collapse. That's not what will happen. What will happen is that the Iranians will lash out. They will try attacking all US bases in the Middle East, and if Saudi Arabia, for example, allows their territory to be used to attack Iran, they'll take out the Saudi oil industry. It'll take at least a decade to rebuild it.
So C-17, C-130 and C-5M aircraft, these are all transport planes, were used to transport cargo and personnel. The Pentagon is deploying additional squadrons and aviation units to the Middle East, extending the deployment of the Carrier Strike Group led by CVN 75, that's the Harry S. Truman. The US is also deploying the CVN 70 Carl Vinson Carrier Strike Group to the region. So the Americans, despite all their talk at Trump about sort of trying to calm things down, I'm not going to start any new wars. Well, I suppose this Gaza thing, he can say, well, I didn't start that war, even though it's got into a world war, I didn't start it, man.
Well, yes, I mean, I think basically, you can't basically take what Trump says to the bank, can you? He'll say one thing, then he'll say something else. But I think the plan, the Israeli plan, the Netanyahu plan, is a war with Iran. It's a war that they can't win, and they're stupid to even start. But don't presume that people are rational.
The British-American special relationship is basically King Charles is trying to make sure that the Russian war carries on, and Trump is trying to make sure that the Gaza war carries on.
That's right.
This is the special relationship.
Yes. Well, it's a bit of an abusive relationship, isn't it? Let's face it. I mean, America, the US doesn't really do kind of respectful, equal relationships with anybody, does it? Let's face it, they've always been like this. This is just the final revelation of the way they are.
Anyway, at these rallies in London, there's been lots going on, particularly to do with Gaza, which is what we're focusing on at the moment. And one of the things I'd love to see, if I were Director General of the BBC, my little fancy dream, would be live coverage of some of these rallies, because you get some brilliant speakers. Here's a guy called Khalid Abdullah, who was speaking in central London a couple of weeks ago at one of the rallies.
Please give a very warm welcome to the actor Khalid Abdullah.
Thank you. People of conscience around the world, rise up. The rights and norms that generation after generation have fought for are being eroded everywhere. The writing is on the wall. In these last weeks alone, international law ripped up with electricity cut off, water supplies threatened, aid held back, children killed, neighbourhoods demolished, thousands more displaced, and there have even been reports of dogs amidst the rubble, fat on human remains. And then we've seen people threatened with deportation, bookshops and schools raided, films censored or denied distribution, protests restricted, and as many of you know, like in my case, letters sent by the police. Attempts in multiple cities around the world to build a culture of intimidation. And yet, it will never win, because look at us. We keep going. They try to stop us, and we grow. They smother our consciences with fear. They try to smother our consciences with fear, and they smear themselves forever. Generation after generation fought and died and went to prison in the knowledge that the path of justice always shines brightest. It is the herald of peace. Yes, this world looks a lot like the rise of fascism in the 1930s, and yes, it looks a lot like McCarthyite America, and yes, this is a genocide. And this is why Jewish people around the world who see this moment for what it is are rising in solidarity with the movement for Palestinian liberation in unprecedented numbers, true to the most extraordinary Jewish traditions. Most recently, taking over Trump Tower to free Mahmoud Khalil. Free Mahmoud Khalil, just as they did in Penn Station and in the college campuses in Columbia, in America and around the world, and here today in every part of this movement. But let us not get fixated on comparisons. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Our job is to make it rhyme more wholesomely, which is why we see such extraordinary and moving solidarity between Arabs and Jews and people of all backgrounds and faith in this pivotal moment in history, pointing the way towards a better world through justice for Palestine, and true to the fullness of our heritage and the injustices our parents and grandparents have faced. I will end on these words from 12 Jewish visionaries who wrote a declaration and published it in a full-page spread in Haaretz on the 22nd of September 1967. 52 words in Hebrew and 67 in English, and they read as follows. Our right to defend ourselves from extermination does not give us the right to oppress others. Occupation entails foreign rule. Foreign rule entails resistance. Resistance entails repression. Repression entails terror and counter-terror. The victims of terror are mostly innocent people. Holding on to the occupied territories will turn us into a nation of murderers and murder victims. Let us get out of the occupied territories immediately. And that was 1967. And here we are. Free, free Palestine! Thank you very much.
So that was 1967, where the Israelis had basically seized the whole other areas of land. The people in Gaza were driven into Gaza from the surrounding area. They seized the West Bank, and they also seized Jerusalem. And the people who were, speaking in Haaretz, which is a sort of guardian of Israel, were saying, well, we can't be occupying Palestinian land. We've got to withdraw from it and perhaps have a two-state solution. But I think things have gone further than that now. I would argue that if Israel's going to exist, it's got to be back inside the 1948 borders. And if they don't accept that, and it doesn't look as if they're ever going to accept that, then maybe the state has to be liquidated altogether. Just one state there, Palestine.
The big supporters, of course, are the United States, aren't they, financially and militarily, Martin? Still, do you think? Has there been any change with Trump?
No, of course not. I mean, Trump. I mean, Miriam Adelson gave him $100 million for his election campaign, and now he's paying it back.
That's called the Israel lobby, innit? Yeah. Musk is to remain a friend and advisor to Donald Trump after leaving the Department for Government Efficiency. The Vice President made a remark about reports that the President told cabinet members the billionaire will be stepping back. So J.D. Vance said on Thursday Elon Musk is going to remain a friend and an advisor to the Vice President and Donald Trump after he leaves his current role.
So does that mean that the Department of Government Efficiency has been disbanded, or what does it mean?
I don't think so, no. It means that it's still there, but it's just run by somebody else. I'm not sure who. So I can have a look for that. But it's interesting, isn't it? That this is maybe. Do you think Trump was just using him as a way of sort of getting votes? Maybe.
Well, I mean, Elon Musk gave him a load of money. Yeah.
Maybe the money ran out. Well, it was only for a certain time.
Well, I think the thing is that what everybody looking at this situation in the US is thinking is this is a clown show. There's not even it's not even clear who's in charge or what they're trying to achieve.
Well, let me suggest to you that it's going to be another tech billionaire that takes over from Musk, one of his mates.
Well, it probably is. It's not going to be Jeremy Corbyn, is it? I mean, the Russians and the Chinese have developed their own political systems. In Russia, obviously, they do have competitive elections. In China, not so much. But what they've got there is a stable setup where decisions are made by people who know what they're talking about. Rather than a load of people who it's just you just don't know what they're going to do next, and I bet you they don't know what they're going to do next. Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump seems to like the idea of keeping people guessing, and the way to do that is keep yourself guessing, isn't it? If I don't know what I'm going to do, they're definitely not going to know, are they?
Well, one thing that still doesn't seem to have emerged is this report into the weaponisation of the federal government, which has got a lot of stuff about the FBI. The FBI is pretty much a can of worms. It'd be interesting to see what happens when that comes out, won't it?
Well, it will. I mean, and obviously, one of the effects of what's going on is we're finding out all sorts of things about what the government gets up to, which we didn't know about. But this is...
Isn't the permanent government more of a problem than the elected people?
Well, no, what's going on now reminds me very much of the Cultural Revolution in China, yeah? Where Mao Zedong turned around and said, bombard headquarters, and he encouraged teenagers and young people to attack the Communist Party officials, and the whole country was plunged into chaos for at least a decade. The US is in a very similar position because of the chaos at the top. But of course, the only people really affected by what went on in China were the Chinese. The US is the dominant power on the planet, and if they go into this kind of tailspin, we're all going with them.
Well, that report from that committee, been no news about it apart from when it was mentioned by Trump when he got inaugurated. So maybe that committee report is being buried right now.
Well, it's quite likely that the CIA ain't going to roll over and just disband itself because Trump says so. And, of course, no doubt there's plenty of people in the CIA and the FBI and so on who are quite sympathetic to Trump. He's just going to get rid of the people he doesn't like. And, you know, the Department of Homeland Security with the people who arrested these students. And, of course, that never existed before 2001. No. He's now got 1 million employees.
Another massive piece of news this week is about Marine Le Pen being told that she can't run. So what do you make of that? I suppose you'll be cock-a-hoop.
No, I think it's stupid. I mean, at the end of the day, she probably was fiddling her expenses, but then they all do. She's been singled out here as a way of trying to prevent her running. It won't do any good, because she's got, I can't remember his name, there's a younger fella that's potentially going to be the candidate, and it'll probably increase votes for the National...
I mean, I didn't see any real reference to this, but I mean, many people, I'm sure, are recognising that this is what they were trying to do to Donald Trump, and in fact, she did stand a reasonable chance in this upcoming presidential election, as obviously Donald Trump did. She just doesn't have the wherewithal to fight it, and maybe the money to fight this thing through the courts, like Trump did in the States.
Well, I mean, they've imprisoned the guy in Romania because they didn't want him to stand.
Have they actually imprisoned? I thought they just told him he's not allowed to stand.
I think he was imprisoned as well. I can't remember.
In different, I mean, obviously imprisoned Imran Khan, the elected Prime Minister of Pakistan. So this seems to be going on quite a lot, doesn't it? Is this the military, the US military, or who behind this?
Well, behind all of this is the US deep state. They've been behind all of these things for years and years and years. The overthrow of the democratically elected government of Iran in 1954 was the deep state in Britain.
So it's not the French deep state trying to get rid of Le Pen?
The French deep state are also trying to get rid of Le Pen, yes, because they don't, because they feel that she's a threat. Don't forget that the problem for the right wingers, I've often pointed out, is Trump's tariffs are directed at the French and the British. Yeah. Now, if we're going to copy Trump, we've got to stop US goods coming into Britain. Yeah. Yeah, we're not going to buy your... This is what's happening in Canada. People are going to the shop and saying, I'm not buying anything American in the shop. Yeah? Because that's if we're going to copy Trump, that's what we have to do. Yeah. We're not going to buy anything American at all. Now, that's not what Trump wants, is it?
I can remember many years ago they had this little campaign called Buy British. Well, if you can find anything British now, that's the question. Anyway, let's have a listen. Just listen to a report on Le Pen and the arrest this week.
Marine Le Pen, France's leading far-right politician, storms out of a Paris court before the judge finishes reading a verdict of guilty. Her hopes of becoming France's first far-right president derailed by a court convicting her of embezzling European Parliament funds and banning her from public office for 5 years. She was convicted of misusing more than $3 million paid to her party to fund its work and officials in the European Parliament. Instead, the cash was redirected illegally to her National Rally Party in France for use in domestic politics. She refused to speak until later, claiming the judgment was a dark day for democracy.
Ce qu'elle fait là, c'est qu'elle dit
what the judge is doing here is she's saying, I'm going to make you ineligible straight away, and I'm doing it precisely to stop you from being able to be an elected president. If that's not a political decision, I don't know what is.
So, effectively, it is. I mean, it does sound like a political decision, isn't it?
It does, and of course, it may well be that there is some, meat in it, in the sense that she's misused.
Well, there's some also desperation in that Macron and his mates know that they're history.
That's right.
They're toast.
I don't think, you see, doing something like that is not going to work. Because there is another candidate, the younger guy who, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but he will no doubt run, and of course he's likely to get more votes as a result of them preventing Marine Le Pen from running. Not that I would ever vote for Marine Le Pen, but that's not the point, is it?
Well, I wonder if this younger candidate you were talking about, maybe the Mossad or somebody else has got a little bit of blackmail information on him, and that's why they want her out the way.
Well, maybe so, Tony, but I think he's very much regarded as her protégé, and, he'll just come to the fore instead of her. And they may or may not win a presidential election. I think the right wing in Europe, who are pro-Trump, are going to have a very difficult period going forward now, because Trump's trying to put their voters out of work. And they can't be pro-Trump. I mean, Nigel Farage is pro-Trump. He wants to put British steel workers out of work. Does he agree with that? Because that's what Trump wants.
Well, I'm not sure. But so, she's also described as far right. I mean, personally, I would describe Marine Le Pen and their party as a nationalist party, rather like something like the BNP. That doesn't mean to say that they're nice, friendly, cuddly or anything, but that's actually what the other parties are all, although they're French political parties, they are pro-globalisation, they're pro-internationalist, aren't they?
The France Insoumise, and I've forgotten the leader of the France Insoumise, it'll come to me in a second, Mélenchon, they are anti-globalisation. France is anti-globalisation in its intrinsic mentality. And of course, if you're anti-globalisation, as I say, that means we don't buy anything American and we send our bases back. Yeah? That's what anti-globalisation means in France.
Right.
Yeah?
Jordan Bardella is your friend.
Yeah. Well, he's not my friend, but he'll be the candidate.
Martin,
he'll be the candidate.
Martin, you have to realise we're not in America here. Sometimes I say things ironically. Jordan Bardella is your friend who you were trying to figure out what his name was.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's been groomed as the successor, so he will no doubt be the person who will stand, and he'll probably do quite well. But don't forget, it's not a proportional system, but it's a 2-round system in France. So she may get the most votes, or he may get the most votes in the first round, and then all of the left and the centre will vote for whoever is in the second round. It could be Mélenchon, for example. And they won't win.
Okay, so moving on to take a little look at Ukraine. We're not going to do too much, but I will. I quite like to use a little bit of some of the interviews from RT, especially since it's now banned here. And you and I used to be, well, we were great superstars on. Well, not superstars, but we did appear on RT quite a lot in between around about is it 2014 and. Quote, and in fact you more recently, but on RT there's all sorts of fascinating stuff which they will not show us and they do not show us, and of course the main point to make here is that you do not know what they're not telling you, and there's quite a lot of stuff, Martin, they're not telling us about Ukraine. Would you like to just start by telling us a few things that you think about Ukraine that we're not being told here in the UK by the BBC?
Well, I mean, there's such a lot that, you know, you'd have to, there's a huge amount of stuff that
we're going to hear from
a
former Ukrainian Secret Security Service officer who was interviewed by RT, who's now obviously decided he's had enough. But that's the sort of thing we hear on RT, but we never hear here in the UK.
Earlier we heard from a former Ukrainian Security Service officer. He says that while some men desperately try to escape a tragic end on the battlefield, others are making a killing, literally.
This is a deliberate policy of the state. You understand, there are people in power in Ukraine now who need a war. Without a war, no one needs them, and most likely, they will end their fate sadly. I mean Zelensky and his entourage. And in order to continue the war, they need soldiers. They're not doing very well at the front. No, the front is not collapsing entirely, but the situation, for example, is clearly not in favor of the Ukrainian armed forces. Zelensky needs to show at any cost that Ukraine can still do it, and this requires strength. I think Zelensky is planning for the summer of 2025 some form of another counteroffensive, and people are needed for this. And there is not a shortage, but there are certain problems with that, and therefore there may be problems with extending the military service postponement, problems with the operation of this Reserve Plus program. Perhaps this is a deliberate action on the part of the Ukrainian leadership. They need people. They need to replenish their losses as much as possible, to create new divisions. In the end, a lot of infantry that can be thrown into the troops. We see that no one wants to join the army, and any attempts to mobilize are being resisted as much as possible. And people are fleeing Ukraine by any means, trying to cross the border legally, illegally. Currently, the richest people in Ukraine are border servicemen who serve in Western Ukraine and former smugglers. Again, Western Ukrainians who used to smuggle cigarettes, alcohol, military products, are now transferring people across the border. According to my data, prices have increased. If, say, a year and a half ago, one person was transferred for about $10,000, now it's $20,000, or even more for one person. Imagine if a group of 5 people are transferred, it's $100,000, a very serious increase in the salary of the same border servicemen. This shows that people are aware that the Eastern Front is death.
Wow, where do you start the meat grinder? 20 grand they're charging to get you out of Ukraine if you don't want to fight and die.
Well, that's right. I mean, you mentioned earlier what...
So that was Vasily Prozorov, who's a former member of the security service in Ukraine. It's a GRU, I think. Oh, hang on, what is it called? SBU.
SBU. Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things I would say about the Ukraine is that the Maidan massacre in 2014. In 2017, I was on RT talking about it. There was a court case in Kiev, as we now must call it, and the Berkut riot police who were charged with killing the demonstrators, 80-odd people killed, and 6 police officers, they went free because the people who had actually carried out the massacre testified from Georgia in a video link, and that they said that it was a Georgian crew. There were 48 Georgians and 2 Lithuanians, orchestrated by an American officer called Christopher Boyenga, and they killed those pro-EU demonstrators. How many people in Britain know that?
Very, very few. Putin envoys, except listeners to this show, I think would probably know. They could say Boyenga just like that, because you've said it a good few times, and thank goodness you do. Remind us. Putin envoy holds 2 days of talks in the United States, says they were positive. The envoy, Kirill Dmitriev, is the chief executive of Russia's biggest direct investment fund, and he's in the States at the moment. They're trying to mend things, aren't they?
Yes. Instead of move fast and break things, move slowly and mend things. That's the way to go, isn't it? That's the Russian philosophy.
Well, it certainly seems to make a lot of sense to do that. And also, as we went to a close this week, I spoke to... Is it because it's 5 years since we had all this lockdown stuff? There's been lots and lots of stuff about that on various forms of media. But I can't help but thinking, Martin, no one really cared about Partygate. No one really cared who was switched on. These people might be spreading the virus. Don't you think maybe that the students in Bristol that were having virus parties to catch it, even though they were supposed to be locked down, etc., were maybe doing the right thing?
No, I think it was a deliberately engineered biological warfare.
Right, even though young people can't be harmed by this, it was actually very sensible for them to use that fact and their knowledge in order to catch the disease. So they built up natural immunity. They didn't need any pills, jabs, separation, or anything.
I don't agree with that point of view, Tony, and you know I don't. It's a deliberate biological warfare attack designed to wreck the Chinese economy. It didn't succeed because the Chinese, in fact, dealt with it as a military problem. And we're at war. Millions of people have died. COVID was a deliberate attempt to kill people by the Western deep state. And so possibly are the vaccines. And so possibly the messed up lockdowns. If you get your lockdown right, as they did in China, they were all back to work within 6 months. We weren't. We were messing around for ages. And their economy is growing, of course, and ours isn't. Yeah? Who got it right and who got it wrong?
Well, RFK, he's in the States. What do you make of him? RFK Jr.?
Well, I
said earlier that he only managed to get in because he said, you've got to support Israel, basically.
Yes, well, I mean, basically, it was the Israelis who probably assassinated his father. But, of course, he's got Stockholm Syndrome. And now he was going on about how anti-Semitism is like the worst form of plague, like in the Middle Ages, and that we've got to purge it from our society, which means that he's in full support of, and so is Tulsi Gabbard.
Isn't that the only way to actually gain any power in the States?
Well, that's right, but that means that the people running the show are not allowed to challenge Israel at all. Now, ultimately, of course, the Israeli-American-British axis are responsible for World War III, and the good news is they're going to lose unless we destroy everything. Yeah, we could all end up dead, or they're going to lose because they're not necessarily rational. Israeli policy goals are not rational. Yeah, they cannot. What they want to do isn't doable. and they will ultimately be, they're going to bring catastrophe on themselves and everybody else.
So David Sachs is one of the people who's been involved in the regulation of medicines in the United States, and I spoke to the wonderful Hedley Rees. He's local sort of here from Wales. He's very hot. In fact, he's spent his whole career in checking the supply chains of these various vaccines and various medicines. And I was quite amazed to hear, as he spoke to me, and I'll put the full interview up on our show page at thisweek.org.uk later on this evening, that this guy, Marks, has actually been sacked.
RFK, I started a Substack in January 2022 called Inside Farmer. And in October 2022, Robert Kennedy Jr. subscribed to it as a paid, and he's been subscribing ever since. And a couple of weeks ago, I did a Substack on Peter Marks, who was the head of FDA Biologics Division. Now, he's been approving all these vaccines, and he's been the bad egg there all along. And I explained what he'd been doing. He's been going to meetings in the UK for 4 years on MHRA technology. And he looked at that on the 14th of March. And on the 20th of March, Peter Marks was fired. Well, he resigned, but he had to resign before he was pushed. So
I mean, it's a slow process, I suppose, isn't it, to weed out all these weasels all around in the US government that have managed to get in there through the pharmaceutical industry, Hedley. So anyway, you mentioned your Substack. Do you want to just tell us about a couple of the recent posts on there? What sort of thing we can find?
Well, you can find FDA inspections that at facilities, FDA inspections of the Pfizer facility, Wyeth Biopharma, the one that made the first Pfizer injections, and the inspection that site had was horrible. FDA write what they call a 483 inspection report once they've done an inspection, and those inspectors go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. And they basically found the whole thing was out of control. And that's a picture that you see every facility. And FDA is the only regulatory authority that has continued to inspect facilities through COVID. All the rest of them were doing distance inspections, they call, which is about as useful as a chocolate teapot. So there's a wealth of evidence. I've got the guy who was advising Donald Trump on warp speed, Monsif Slaoui, a 30-year GSK executive. He advised Donald Trump on the warp speed injections, having spent 30 years developing vaccines in Africa. So, I've got Jeremy Farrar in there, Sir Richard Sykes. You couldn't find a more detailed assessment of all the bad stuff that's gone on.
So there's somebody else that should be blasted out from the rooftops all over the world, really, particularly because he's shown that the guy who's now the chief scientific advisor to the World Health Organization was one of the biggest criminal liars. That's Jeremy Farrar from Wellcome Trust, when it came to the Plandemic. Interestingly, Martin, he mentions there this guy, Peter Marks from the FDA, that Hedley did a very detailed post about his role in the Plandemic, and a few days later, actually on the 31st of March, RFK Jr. sacks him.
Yes, and of course that, there's so much going on that people, to be honest with you, I don't follow this stuff as closely as you, because I'm more focused on things like the Ukraine. I just think it's important
that people Hedley's actually pointing out, look what this guy's up to. Yeah. The headline in the CNBC says vaccine stocks fall after FDA official resigns.
Yes, well, in any case, it's quite possible these mRNA vaccines, as they call them, are not in fact vaccines at all, are they? They're a new technology which they would never have been allowed to use because it was, on precautionary grounds if there had not been a COVID plandemic, as you say.
So I had a good old chat this week also with Dr. Bob Gill, and I put that up already up on YouTube, where he explains everything that he's learnt from the Plandemic. One of the most important things was the work of Seema Malhotra and his detailed research into the dangers of the jabs. So that's up there already. And perhaps we'll have some clips next week on that, as we've got now. I think a quite important clip, a final wind-up clip really, which is about the end of Europe. And this is from Michael Hudson, where he takes us through a whole load of history, really, about what's been going on. It's about 10 minutes long altogether. But Michael Hudson, Martin, you've been following him for years. I listen to him. Every word that comes from his mouth, I think, this should be blasted out a bit like Bob Gill all over the world. But it isn't, is it? None of this stuff is getting out there. What we do get is we get fakes, and we get people selling PR about how great our country and our economy is and how wonderful our policymakers are. Well, actually, they're just selling us down the river.
Yes, I mean, Hudson was he's been an economist for years. He was an academic economist, but he's also worked on Wall Street. He used to work for Wall Street banks. And he also used to work for the Pentagon, because he wrote a book, it came out in 1972, called Super Imperialism, which was about how the US would be using the dollar, because they took the dollar off gold, and they're using the dollar in order to basically fleece everybody on the planet. And he thought, well, I'll write this book. I'm nailing my colours to the mast here, but I don't suppose I'll ever get a government job. But in actual fact, he was approached by the Pentagon, and he was employed to teach, generals about what was in the book, about how to use the dollar to fleece the world. And of course, he got paid to do that. Yeah, and he said it was astonishing to me that they pay, because they just treated it as a how to do it book. Yeah, and I said, well, I'm telling everybody else about this as well. I'm telling the Chinese about this. Yeah, the US has been stealing from the rest of the planet absolutely hand over fist for decades and decades and decades. It does seem to me
with the Trump administration, they've basically realised, well, we're going to have to give up on this attempt to take over the world. World domination from Washington is not going to happen, so we need to just get real.
Well, I think what it is, it's just a metamorphosis of everything that's wrong with the US. I mean, Trump's idea that the rest of the world has been stealing from the US, and the US has been hard done by, as Richard Murphy points out. They've got the highest, the wealthy in the US are the wealthiest people in the world.
What about the not wealthy? This is what he's talking about, isn't it? The people who are the poorer 90%, if you want. You've got this super rich, tiny amount, as same as here in the UK.
Well, that's right.
Anyway, let's have a listen to Michael Hudson talking about what he says is the end of Europe. He's saying actually what Europe's doing is it's committing suicide.
Europe wants to get tough with China. You can't get tough with China. You can't threaten China or Russia, because there's nothing that China or Russia needs in Europe. That's what really is so shocking to the European mentality, that the world can get along without Europe at all. Putin and Lavrov said, we'd hoped to have a symbiotic relationship with European industry, technology, and complementary economies, but we realize that isn't work. So we've reshifted our focus eastward to Eurasia and to the BRICS, and we realize now that we don't need Europe anymore. Now that Europe has lost the industrial appeal that it had before Nord Stream in 2022, there's really nothing that it has to offer. And we certainly don't want to take it over, because it would be an albatross for whoever takes Europe as a protectorate under its wing. We don't want that. Now, it's very hard, I think, for Europeans to realize that they're not needed anymore, that they've lost their place in the world. I think most politicians in every country try to do what Trump has said, make America great again. In Europe, they'll say, well, make Europe great again. Or Europe is great, or let's recover our greatness. But they've taken steps that seem so irreversible that they can't do anything. And what they've created is I won't say a counter-narrative on the part of Russia and China, because narratives are usually artificial, false views of the world, but a counter-reality. And I think that last week, Foreign Minister Lavrov said, here is how Russia and our allies are viewing Europe. It's a brief quote. What he said was, over the past 500 years, when the West was more or less formed in the form in which it has survived to this day, all the tragedies of the world originated in Europe or happened thanks to European politics, colonialism, wars, crusaders, the Crimean War, Napoleon, the First World War, Adolf Hitler, all of that came from Europe. Well, President Putin, in his way, have said, well, all this goes really back to the 11th century, when the Great Schism in the Roman Church broke from the Eastern Orthodox Church in Constantinople. And the Romans said, we have to take over Christianity. We have to create a united Europe under the control of Rome. And so the first thing they did after about 1051 or so, when they had the Great Schism, was they began to say, how are we going to defeat and destroy Turkey, Constantinople, and by extension, all the areas that the Orthodox Church controlled? Well, the answer was they hired Norman warlords in Europe and said the first warlord they hired was in the 1070s. And when they went to one of them and said, well, we'll give you southern Italy and Sicily, which right now is a Byzantine area. If you get rid of the Byzantines and make that Catholic, we'll bless you as the king. They then went to William, the conqueror of England, and said, well, if you conquer England, right now it's not really paying us very much money. We will bless you as the king of England if you pledge fealty to Rome. And the whole Crusades was really a crusade to destroy the Greek Orthodox Church in Spain, in southern Italy, in the Balkan area, in every area. They would the Roman Church had warlords taking over, and in order to finance it, their military spending, the church abolished its opposition to usury. It created international banking to finance war lending. And you can see how this whole attempt to integrate Europe from the very beginning is an alternative to what was the economic center of the day, the prosperous center, which was Constantinople and its prosperity that was spreading further eastward. Well, in that sense, the Russians are looking at Europe and saying, well, we thought that there could be peace, but there's not only this underlying religious difference, which to Putin seems to be very important, but there's also a cultural difference that we are very much like China. We're trying to achieve alliance of other countries by mutual gain, win-win situation. What can we offer you in exchange for you're integrating your economy and politics and hence your political and military alignment with us. The Western way, as you see with Donald Trump, is exactly the opposite. Trump, and I think Trump is providing a model that I'm afraid Europe is taking. Trump is sort of saying, we're going to impose tariffs and sanctions on every other country of the world, awful sanctions to every country. We're saying we can destroy your economy. And the other countries, Mexico and France and Canada, for starters, are saying, well, don't do that. And Trump then will say, okay, if we don't destroy you, what are you going to do that benefits us? He's done the same to law firms in the United States, the same to universities. We're going to pull out all of your spending, and if you don't follow a Zionist policy for us, and they'll say, well, what do we have to do to get the funding back so that we can do research and development? And Trump is laying down the neocon policies they have to take, and Columbia University's led the surrender. I think this is how this is the mentality that Europe is trying to emulate, but it doesn't have anything to threaten other countries with. It can't threaten them with sanctions because other countries can say, okay, don't trade with us. We don't need you. We're self-sufficient by ourselves. The whole rest of the world is trying to be self-sufficient, and almost every region is trying to be self-sufficient, so it's not dependent on other countries, so that it can follow its own self-interest. But Europe has destroyed its own self-sufficiency by Nord Stream and by the sanctions against Russia, by seizing Russia's $300 billion that it had in Belgium, and the Euroclear. It's isolated itself from the rest of the world. How on earth can it have anything to gain militarily or politically, even if it were military successful? What can it gain from the rest of the world by isolating itself when the whole rest of the world is divided into new regional geographic groupings? It's as if it's left Western Eurasia, Europe, is a kind of abandoned area. I won't say it's a rust belt like the United States abandoned industrial cities, but it's more than that. It's what it is thought of as its national identity, its historical understanding, its idea that it is a political, moral, intellectual leadership of the world has become a fantasy. How do you ever undergo the psychological healing of that kind of self-inflicted wound that has been sweeping Europe like a disease over the last few years?
Yeah, maybe that disease, Martin, will kill Europe, actually. What Michael's saying there is that we're the leadership are a complete bunch of fantasies. They basically dreamt up some sort of ridiculous fantasy to justify their own stupidity.
Well, the obvious thing that they haven't done, Europe should in fact have been cooperating with the Russians and building ties with China and basically getting out from under the control of the United States.
Why is Europe put itself into this? It's committing harikiri, basically. Our leaders are forcing our continent to commit harikiri. Let's just forget the Americans for a minute, because they seem to be making a few waves that they're not necessarily in for this. But the Europeans seem to be, as Hudson is saying there, they want to isolate themselves from the world, and actually the world is isolating them too. So we're responsible for our own downfall with the idiotic and useless leadership we've got.
The idiotic and useless leadership is basically the idiotic and useless leadership that the US wants us to have. The whole purpose of NATO...
maybe everybody wants us to have that if it's going to mean that Europe isn't going to compete. But look, I mean, it's not... They're not there. The leaders of Europe are not there because the Americans want them to be there. They're there because they are... they're actually... They put themselves there. They put themselves into power. It's almost as if we've got a whole bunch of people who have been propelled into power because they're greedy and selfish, and now they're a bunch of psychopaths that refuse to admit it.
Gladio, where the Communist Party of Italy, the PCI, was comprehensively smashed by terrorism was coordinated from SHAPE headquarters in Brussels, and it was coordinated by US and British generals. So Italy was basically dragged into a pro-US policy by force.
And a whole load of P2 Italian senior people in the military, in the police, in the financial sector, etc., in Italy too. So you can't just blame the Yanks.
No, because there's a unified ruling class in the West, yeah? Lucky Luciano, who was the head of the mafia in the US, was released from prison in New York at the end of the war and sent to Italy to put the mafia in power to make it safe, to make the country safe for British and American capital, yeah? The elites in the West have been up the backside of the Americans. Schroeder in Germany, he was actually on the board of.
Is there any chance we might get rid of these European leaders, or are they here to stay?
Well, they're going to. There's going to be, as we go into this depression that we're going to have now,
they're going to come up with more excuses.
No, there's going to be a 1930s style situation. Okay. And that could easily lead to civil war in countries like Spain or Britain, for example, where we've got a very divided society.
Especially when you have pacifist meetings with the police then go and arrest people and shut them down. That's the sort of thing that actually causes underground, illegal and secret meetings of people who are trying to undermine the rule of law.
When the pie is shrinking, as it will be in Europe for a generation, everybody's got to fight for the crumbs. And that's what it's going to be like. We're going to go through a very, very, very torrid time indeed.
So, Patricia, thank you. Your parcel arrived, actually, here with a nice bottle of wine. Thank you very much. Very kind of you. And a few bickies and things like that. So, thanks very much for that, Patricia. Owed by their deeds, you shall know them. Tariff makers and Quaker shakers. The meeting house where youth demand end the genocide in hand. On streets in Gaza, daily be massacre for all who see. The truth in rubble, count bodies high, where babies scream, children die. Innocence each soul here sigh, to kingdom come, for demon lies. Blooded limbs and children's screams, live ripped open at the seams, and bombs and bullets, tanks and guns, fasting Palestine, now numb. Genocide in each and every street in Gaza, where each soul shall meet with crying, wailing tears and vent for water, food and life lament. At the meeting house, a trumped-up raid on those who go to Gaza's aid, speaking out on genocide, the Mets swoop, in bereft of pride. Yet Quakers in the US of A, where the Don agrees with what they say, tariff threats, abortion prayers, speech their speech they preach in layers. Free speech, they cry, a must for all, or democracy from grace will fall. But youth demand saw quashed, demeaned. Free speech for all. In your dreams. Free speech allowed, but rules they choose. Support for Gaza, H-word, accuse. Close down, beat up, gag and drag across the ground like bags of rag. What evil lies beneath these ghouls, where Zionists make up the rules? Embedded deep beneath the ground, where Satan and his devils found a way to harden human heart, and genocide allowed embark on screens, on phones, into each home in Gaza, now the killing zone. Tariff threats for UK, we read. But rules are rules, the Don has said. Free speech and thoughts and deeds derive, but from genocide in Gaza, hide. Thanks very much again, Patricia. Time to sign off now, and get the script up the right way. It's a war on God, and God's going to win. Time to sign off. Thanks to our guest, Irish Republican Labour activist Martin Summers. Thanks also very much to our earlier guests, who were Katie Sullivan and Melissa Topping, and also, of course, to studio engineer Dave Pazanko. You can download our MP3s to listen in the car or anywhere you like. Follow Tony Gosling Censored on Telegram if you dare. Do please send me interviews and story tips on my Telegram channel and via Not the BCfm Politics Show page, which includes the podcast, full-length interviews, story links and a comment page. Subscribe to my free weekly newsletter, and if you can afford it, please donate or even set up a small monthly sub at thisweek.org.uk. This show's repeated at 11 p.m. Fridays and at 11 and 5 a.m. and p.m. all week on the talkradio.org.uk stream. Do please make live recordings. We've been streaming live from the Eastone Studios in Bristol. on the stream at DJ Plug Radio in Nuneaton, Warwickshire, and live on the Not the BCfm Politics Show app, all now upgraded. Get a new copy, and I'll put a link up tonight for the new app. If you can restream us live or rebroadcast us, just let me know and I'll credit you here. Have a relaxing and enjoyable weekend. Do please join us for Not the BCfm Politics Show next Friday at 5. God bless. And don't let the synagogue of satanic banksters get you down.
You to sleep well tonight. Let the world turn without you tonight. If we try, we'll get by, so forget all about us tonight. Yes, everything's alright. Yes. Sleep and I shall soothe you, calm you and anoint you for your hot forehead. Then you'll feel everything's alright. Yes, everything's fine. And it's cool and the ointment sweet for the fire in your head and feet. Close your eyes and relax, think of nothing tonight.
Hey woman, you find ointment brand new and expensive, should have been saved for the poor. Why has it been wasted? We could have raised maybe 300 silver pieces or more. People hungry, people who are starving, they matter more than your feet and head.
Try not to get worried, try not to turn on to problems that upset you. Don't you know everything's alright? Yes, everything's alright, yes.
Surely you're not saying we have the resources to save the poor from their lot. There will be poor always, pathetically struggling. Look at the good things you've got. Think while you still have me, move while you still see me. You'll be lost and you'll be sorry